I say that, and then I'm gonna pull up the agenda here so I can have the hyperlinks. But there isn't any, so I guess. Just in time. We were waiting for you because you got a nice thought for us. All right, let's go ahead and get started. I'd like to welcome everybody out. I'm Chairman Thomas. I'd like to welcome you to the North Ogden City Planning Commission meeting, October 6th, 2021, being held here at the city office as well as on Zoom. We'll begin our meeting by an invocation or a thought from Commissioner Lund, followed which will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Mason.
Father in heaven, we're grateful for the opportunity to be able to meet together as a planning commission tonight, to be able to discuss the needs of our city and community as we grow, and ask you to bless it as we do so, that we can do so in an open and kind way, that we can be able to know and understand the things that will best serve our community, and that we can work together for a common good. We say these things in Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen. For those physically in attendance, please rise and recite the Pledge of Allegiance with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We will make note that all commissioners are in attendance tonight. Commissioner Nancaro's attending via Zoom. Item number 2, minutes consideration and action to approve the August 18th and September 1st Planning Commission meeting minutes. Any notes or adjustments that need to be made?
Chairman Thomas, I move that we approve the minutes. I know, let it be noted, I did not attend the meeting on September 1st, so I was not able to review those minutes, but though, I'm sorry, I did not attend the August 18th, but the September 1st meeting I did attend, and I reviewed those minutes and they seem accurate. So I was holding off for someone else to.
Well, if there's no adjustment, you can motion to approve them if you weren't there.
Okay, I motion that they be approved.
You have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, our opening meeting statement. John, do we have anybody attending Zoom besides Commissioner Nancaro?
We do have at least one member of the public.
Okay. Before each agenda item begins, city staff will give a report. After the staff report, the item will be opened for other speakers. The applicant will speak first and be allowed up to 10 minutes. Following the applicant, any other interested person will be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. The applicant has final rebuttal time of up to 5 minutes. Any materials that are displayed or referenced, e.g. pictures or written materials, are part of the record and must be left with the commission. Speakers are required to have signed in at the door and will state their name and address before beginning their remarks. If you agree with the previous speaker, then state your agreement to avoid repetitious marks. Speakers shall address the commission from the podium or microphone and shall address all comments to the planning commission. If you're on Zoom, please raise your hand or type in a chat and John will let you in for comments. And please, during the meeting, silence your phone and keep your computer on mute. All right, ex parte communications or conflicts of interest to disclose. All right.
So actually, I don't know the storage unit standards. I guess that's not with an actual application, right? Is that just the standard?
Yeah, it's just a standard for the city.
Okay. Then, no.
All right.
Commissioner Long, you don't feel you stand to benefit financially from a storage unit amendment?
No.
Yeah, okay.
All right, we'll open up for public comment. If you're here for an item on the agenda, you'll have time to speak, being that each item agenda is also a public hearing tonight. If you'd like to speak to the commission about something that is not on the agenda, please step up to the mic, state your name, address, and do so. Or if you're on Zoom, raise your hand or type in the chat, please.
So we do have one on Zoom.
Okay,
It's Corlin Hatala.
Hi,
ahead, Corylyn.
I'm Corylyn Hightower. I live at Village at Prominence Point. Everybody just cringed, I know. My question is, we have got the creek behind our house. And we've just found out in the last 6 months or so that they're planning to put a trail from Village at Prominence Point connecting to 1900 North. There's no room for a trail back there. The way that the development was created, there's not room for hardly a home on 3 of the lots that you know that the Corps of Engineers are debating on whether or not to move the creek. So myself and the other 2 homeowners that border the creek, I talked to one of them and they're not a big fan of it either because it will take part of their yard as well. We paid extra for a larger lot and our property actually goes across the creek. And we put in for a fence to be put in, so we filled out the land use permit. Now it came back saying that we can't put the fence in a floodplain. So we have to have the Corps of Engineers confirm that we can do that. So I've got a letter into Nicole with the Army Corps of Engineers waiting for a reply. I spoke with the mayor on the 30th and told him that the pathway is going to be just a nightmare, especially when they finish building all the rest of the houses and apartments here. It's going to be just a pathway for burglaries, a pathway for people that don't belong in the area to come in, a pathway for people to escape from whatever they've done at wherever they've done it, let alone a highway through my backyard and other people that are on this property. So the mayor told me that we needed to contact the Planning Commission to see if we can request an amendment to the development agreement to take that trail out and use the trail that goes from over by the lodge instead of trying to create another one. I don't know who would be liable for anybody that got injured on that trail if it did go in where it's on my property. Liability, stuff like that, maintenance, that's all a big concern, let alone that I'm paying taxes on it and I paid extra for the property. So I need to know what you need from me to be able to get this sent to this county or the city commissioners to see if we can amend the development agreement to have that trail taken out on the west side.
So this is Scott Hess, the planning director for the city. You could, with the signature of the property owner, so that'd be the developer, put in an application for a development agreement amendment as like an owner's agent essentially, where the development agreement is a legal contract between the developer and the city. I don't believe a property owner can bring that forward as a request for an amendment, but could do so in conjunction with the holder of that development agreement, which in this case would be Jack Barrett and Partners. I could be wrong on that process, but you know that's what my recommendation would be contact the developer and see if you can partner together to make that request, and then it would roll forward through a planning commission for recommendation, and city council is where those ultimately are decided at because they're legislative in nature. a contract essentially between the city as a property owner.
The last person I want to deal with is him. But I know that he as well does not want to put the trail in. And I know the city is tired of making amendments for this development, and I totally get it. He is a pain, and I do not ever want to be on his side. But for the trail, I know he doesn't want to go through with it because there's those 3 lots that are too shallow for homes. I would rather have the 3 houses next to me and no trail in our backyard. And give him that than have the trail put in and be able to touch everybody's house as you walk by. So I know that he is in favor of it. The developer, Jack Barrett, does not want to put the trail in. And the mayor had told me that, yeah, they are basically tired of giving him amendments. And so they were like, no, we're going to hold fast to the trail. When I talked to the mayor about it, he seemed to be more in agreement that, yeah, I wouldn't want that kind of traffic in my backyard either. So basically, the mayor said that I needed to be at the this planning meeting to put in a request for that. So I don't know when Jack Barrett's going to be back around. I know they put in for the independent living and for the clubhouse. I know those have been put in. I think you're going to discuss those in November, correct?
Yeah, we are in review of those application documents now, so that's not been determined on a meeting yet,
Okay,
based on completeness of that application, but it will come around and it'll be posted on the website when those are.
when it's going to be on.
Yeah.
Okay,
So I think if you just get with Scott Hess here and kind of look at what some of your options are, and Scott can look that up. I believe that trail is actually on property that has been deeded to the city with the canal, isn't it?
No, it is on.
Oh.
It is?
We verified and gave Corlin a copy.
So it's
of the
different over
plan.
there at the lodge, right? Oh,
Yeah, sorry.
sorry about that. Where the lodge property is and through those other neighborhoods, it's city-owned property, so.
Right.
well, and that's the thing
I
is you've
guess
got
you're a little bit different.
a retention pond that's over on the west side, the southwest side of the development. There's a retaining pond, a smaller one. And then you've got backyards on those 2 houses and our house. So I've put in to have a fence put in, and now I'm kind of on hold because they're telling me I've got to leave 40 feet.
Hey, ma'am, I know this isn't an application we have in front of us, but before it comes up to us, I'd like to just drive through the area and take a look so that I can speak somewhat educated if it does come up. Can you give me a description of where you're talking in the village of Providence Point?
Yeah, and who is this again? I'm sorry.
This is Commissioner Mason.
Okay. I am at 218 East, 1850 North. So we're the last ones on the north end with the flagpole.
In the single homes there?
Yes, patio home.
Okay. Permission to lurk around your backyard? I'm kidding, I'll just drive by.
No, you can come in. I would love to come and show you what we're trying to do and where we're having an issue, since none of it was on the plans that we had seen before we built. We didn't find out about the trail system until, like I say, about 6 months ago.
Okay, as stated, we don't have an actionable item for you to help you out tonight, but I will go take a look at it so that if it comes up, I can have a nice visual of it.
So in the meantime, what can I do about the fence that we were going to put in?
The fence issue with that land use permit, because there's a recorded easement on the plat itself in your property, we can't administratively approve a fence within that recorded easement restricted area. So your letter into the Corps is a good first start. If the Army Corps deems that area is not wetland or, stream, like upper stream area or other, then we can look at an encroachment in there. In any case, it would be some sort of encroachment into an easement that's located on the plat, could potentially require a plat amendment if they see that wetlands issues are not as broad or wide as it was originally drawn, but as we have a recorded plat, we really don't have an administrative way to approve a fence within that stream area.
Okay, because my property actually goes across the stream, so the easement, or is it the floodplain that's the issue then, or is it the easement?
It's the floodplain. So the floodplain is indicated on the plat as a cashed out area. And we don't permit development in floodplains at all. That's an Army Corps of Engineer regulated area.
So if I can get them to authorize it, we're okay.
That's a good first step. And then we can see if there's any other plat amendment requirements or anything we need to do.
Do we need to leave 40 feet or can we leave 10 feet?
Well, right now it just is what it is. We measured on a scaled plat what the floodplain is shown as. So short of an Army Corps of Engineer floodplain certification, which takes time and money, we really don't have another document to go off of regarding whether it's 40 feet or 10 feet or another number on the specified floodplain area. That's just what was deemed as the size of it on the plat.
Yeah, because everything's been raised up since that plat. Because when we moved in, 3 or 4 months after we moved in, our bank or our mortgage lender said that we were in a floodplain. And we're like, no, we're not. So we had to get a hold of the Army Corps and have them re-title us as not in a floodplain. So it's been raised up and there's gravel underneath so you can get the fresh water to come down into that drainage that goes into the canal. They created it so it would flow to the creek, but it's all raised up from what your map probably has.
Yep, and the Army Corps, I think if they're willing to come out and stake that and show what the true level of the floodplain is, then that would be a great step for us to figure out where the fence could go, whether it's an encroachment or just right on the edge of the floodplain.
Okay, so once I have their authorization, I still need to bring it to you.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public?
Not at this time.
All right, let's move on to our legislative items.
Chairman Thomas, as discussed briefly before the meeting, I propose an adjustment to our agenda in the interest of the public that we have in attendance. I did a quick poll and found that their interest was on legislative item number 8. I just proposed we move that up to the first item so move it up ahead of item number 6.
Okay.
That's my proposal.
We have a motion to adjust the order of the agenda items. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and a second to renumber the agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, so what is on the printout and the published agenda, we will move on to item number 8, Zone Text Amendment 2021-5. Public hearing and consideration and recommendation on a legislative amendment to fence standards in corner triangles. Scott Hess will present. Scott?
Thank you. This is a request zoning text amendment 2021-05. The applicable ordinance is North Ogden City Ordinance 11-10-11C. And this is a legislative decision. I'll read this once, and each of the decisions tonight are legislative decisions except for the streetscape review. When the city is considering a legislative matter, the Planning Commission is acting as a recommending body to the City Council. The city has wide discretion in taking legislative action. Examples of legislative actions are general plan, zoning map, and land use text amendments. Legislative actions require the Planning Commission give a recommendation to the City Council. Typically, the criteria for making a decision related to a legislative matter require compatibility with the general plan and existing codes. So for a quick background, we have a North Ogden resident who applied to the city to install an open style wrought iron fence along their property line. The property is located on an intersection corner, which restricts any obstruction in view, including fencing within an area bound by 40 feet along one line of the property and 40 feet along the other line of the property, and connecting those two lines as a triangle. And the code says, as referenced in subsection C, no obstruction to view in excess of 2 feet in height shall be within this 40-foot site triangle on a corner lot. The 40-foot site triangle is measured from the intersection of the property lines. Just as a quick aside, the city is working on, or the Public Works standards have a draft amendment to update this Clearview corner triangle, which would then be 100 feet along the side property line and 30 feet across the front. The net result in this particular case is only a few feet difference. So when you go from property line out to right-of-way line, and then you change those numbers, at any rate, the Clearview triangle is not allowing the property owner to construct the type of fencing that they want to construct. And in this particular case, the reason they want the fence is that there's a low retaining wall along that length of sidewalk. So they're trying to protect both their property and increase safety on this 18 to 24 inch tall retaining wall. So staff has tracked some code amendments in our code. It looks like this section was adopted, or at least maybe the image was adopted in 2017. And I think the question for the Planning Commission to answer today is, should any style of fencing be permitted in the obstruction of view triangle on corner lots? To do a bit of analysis here, we drove around the city. I contacted other cities. I looked at different codes, and this is really, it's just a 50-50 issue. You know, some cities permit it, some cities don't. In talking with staff, there was a great point brought up that the more urban a community is, the less worry about site triangle there is. I mean, you have zero build lot lines in downtown Ogden, for instance, that allow buildings to be built right up to property lines. There is no Clearview triangle in those areas. And I think part of the reason for that is that you just assume somebody's going to walk out in front of you, or that there's going to be a parked car or some other, something. So you drive more aware, or you are more aware in some of those settings than in some of the areas that we have in our city, where you have major collector roads, east-west or north-south at some of these intersection points that could be a perceived or a real hazard should we allow these encroachments into the Clearview triangle. I drove around the city. I found a few instances of existing Clearview triangle violations. One is the intersection up the road here to the east at 850 East and 2600 North. This has a dog park on the east side, and on the west side, there's an existing 4-foot chain link fence. I reached out to Police Chief Dirk Quinney, and he actually updated today. He sent me an email, and I'll just let you know what it says. Police chief went through the crash records going back 5 years. At the intersection of 850 East and 2600 North, there have been 4 traffic accidents in the time frame, none involving a driver's lack of visibility due to the site triangle. One was a rear end collision, one was a car versus a deer, one was a slide off on a snowy road, and one U-turn accident on 2600 North. 2600 North in this area represents one of those major east-west connectors for the city. People drive fairly quickly down that road. And as such, I think that you stop at the stop bar and then you creep out and you make sure that you can see before you go. So it's not clear, at least from North Ogden City and from our police chief, whether or not the fences in the Clearview triangle represent a site issue. One thing is, see-through fences are see-through when you're sitting perpendicular to them, but when you're parallel to them, you can't see through them. So the length on the front of a property as you creep up, could represent a greater site impairment than just looking directly through the side of a chain link or wrought iron fence. So I looked at other city codes. Harrisville City allows a 4-foot tall fence in the corner triangle. No mention of obstruction of view or see-through properties. South Salt Lake is a 4-foot tall non-view obscuring fence in the Clearview triangle. Mill Creek City has a definition for an open style fence up to 3 feet in height within the Clearview triangle, and then that has a specific definition to mean an aggregate of 50% or more openings. And then I found an image of that from Frisco, Texas, that shows less than 50% opaque, 50% opaque, and more than 50% opaque. So really, I think, from staff's perspective, we've prepared an ordinance that would permit this. We've looked at how you could amend the code to permit it. It does not change any other heights or other location standards for fencing, so it retains 3.5 feet in the front yard. It just would require that those fences in the Clearview triangle be at least 50% see-through. And I think we would have to have the manufacturer help us with that, or, it'd be a staff determination on what constitutes 50% see-through. There's some,
Do you have a definition on the opacity of what a chain link would be?
that would be like 80 plus. I mean, that's.
I think when we did those fence ordinances, chain link are in the 90s.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, a wrought iron
Wait,
fence,
more than,
a wrought iron fence was like 90% opaque.
Yeah, you take a foot or a 2-foot section of the fence and you essentially add up all the material within that 2-foot section of fence, and then you just do a percentage division of open versus solid. So a wrought iron fence where you've got 3-inch openings and then less than 1-inch wide bars is inherently more open than, say, the same type of vinyl fencing where it's more like 2.5, 2.5. And that's like 50% open.
okay, so higher number means it's higher, it's more block.
More,
A higher number is more
a higher
see-through.
number in this case is more C.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, thank you.
So, okay, because I'm reading your thing, it says the opacity is the degree to which lighter views are blocked. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, and if I need to make that more clear, happy to. But the intent being that it needs to be at least 50% or more open in these Clearview triangle areas. And that's,
I
that's a
think if you
number.
use that diagram that you found out of Texas and said more than 50% as an example,
Mhm.
because then it compares with the picket fence next to it, which wouldn't qualify.
Right.
Yeah, the diagram's helpful.
I like that.
Okay.
Plus in your wording, you use the word transparent instead of opaque, which.
Although, are we at the discussion point of this yet?
No,
Well,
okay.
I'll just
I'll hold off.
to quickly finish, staff would recommend leaving the 2-foot height requirement for any and all things that aren't fences that are at least 50% transparent or more. The reason for this is not to create, when I talked to the police chief, he said that the corner triangle, it creates a lot of either legal nonconforming or just it created a lot of nonconformity, which is just the nature of cities. You've got people in neighborhood areas with shrubs and bushes and all sorts of stuff planted right up to the corner of their property. Any and all of those that are planted in that 40-foot Clearview triangle at an intersection are essentially a violation of the code. And we don't press on that a lot, but it's nice to have it there when you do have a true safety issue, that you have a code enforcement mechanism or enforcement mechanism to go in and clear out a safety issue. And we did have to do that recently. We cleared some long-standing bushes, carved them down to 2 feet tall. I think the city actually did the work, Public Works Department did the work. And it was the intersection of 2 busy roads and had limited site visibility that was causing a true issue. So the fence kind of stands alone in the code as the one thing that could be taller than 2 feet as an obstruction. And in that case, it has to be more than 50% transparent. So staff's recommendation is that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing, consider the ordinance, and help us make a recommendation to the City Council, which, based on our pending application we have, will be next week. So I need to talk to a Planning Commission member about willingness to come and attend the City Council meeting, because we may or may not have draft minutes available.
Okay.
That's all. Thanks.
Well, let's go ahead and, is there any discussion we want to have prior to?
I just have a
Public.
question. Talk about the 2 feet high. You have your cars, people say you can't see when your car sits higher, you're sitting higher in your car than 2 feet. Unless you're in these little hot rod cars going around, you can't hear yourself. But usually your car, you're above 2 feet. So I have got issues, 3 feet high, if 50% or more see through. But I know the bushes you're talking about. They're that tall. They're about 4 feet. My cheered when they took it down.
Yeah, And the 2 feet, one thing I always try to be conscious about is that this is North Ogden isn't flat.
No.
So 2 feet looks a lot different on an uphill stop sign than 2 feet does on a downhill stop sign at an intersection. So I would have to put more thought into whether or not the actual obstruction should or shouldn't be, taller or less than 2 feet, because we do have a lot of major intersections that happen at uphill stop signs. And 2 feet, depending on where that stop bar is physically higher in
Could
that
be 8
case,
feet.
from where you're stopped
So-
at.
The only question that I had, and it's probably for you, Lauren, because you are longer than Scott here, but did we not? I have in my memory that we changed what the site triangle definition is. That you did a presentation and said, hey, it's not really a 40 by 40 right triangle. It's more like a 20 by 35.
Yeah.
Two
We
different.
discussed it in planning commission a few times. We discussed it at city council, but the actual ordinance has.
We never did adopt a change. Okay.
Adopt those.
So I remember right, I think we were talking about 1050 east and 2600
Yes.
over there where the trees come into that intersection.
But those will be coming before too long, those changes, but they are complete yet.
Yeah, okay. So I didn't know if you knew that, Scott, that,
He mentioned that.
oh, he did? Oh, see,
I'm just gonna throw this
Slow
out here
learner.
before that we open the public hearing or whatever we're gonna do. Oh, I'm sorry. But, I guess in my recollection, we spent a tremendous amount of time revising this. And it wasn't just vehicles that we were concerned about for safety. It was also kids on bikes, people walking, and that kind of thing. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. to keep in
Commissioner
mind
Carroll, I
as
think
we
that-
go on.
I agree with you, and I think the ordinance is good as it's going to be is going to be presented, but I don't know if we talked about opacity, right? The ability to see through something that's there. And
you don't remember the field trip and all the
Oh, yeah, I
signs,
remember
that.
fences we stopped at?
yeah, I guess.
And Rob's
I
like,
do.
now
think we
this
did.
one is this percent,
Yeah.
now this one is.
Okay, but where I struggle with this, okay, first of all, it seems like this, as I read the proposal before the meeting, it seemed like there was a persuasive argument in there, which I support, that would encourage wrought iron fences. And everyone on the planning commission probably knows how I feel about chain link fences, even though I have one surrounding my backyard. I hate them, and I'd love to do something that encourages wrought iron fences. And so something like this, but if we're opening the door to chain link fences encroaching into the front yard, then, I'm just a little put off by that. I don't know if the ordinance still would cover that. The other thing is, when I think about this is, as constructed, it can have whatever opacity it has. And then once vines and stuff comes up, it would change. And so they can build it to the specifications and it would be safe. 3 years later, now it's a bunch of grapes hanging from it. And
Then it would be out of compliance.
then it would be out of compliance. Obviously.
It'd still be, just like cutting a hedge, it would be the responsibility to.
Well, I'm not saying I'm against it. I'm just trying to think critically about, if we do this, what are some of the obvious drawbacks? And you would make a structure that could then turn opaque. I don't have an answer to that question, but I'm just throwing that out there.
Any other discussion before we open the public hearing?
I'm trying to find on here, in our current code, I'm looking at it where it disallows chain link in the front yard setback. And I'm not sure if it does currently.
I don't remember it does, but it does. But is there, in this particular instance, did you mention that the yard is lower than the sidewalk?
Yeah, in this instance, the
And
yard
did
itself.
we not make an exception to fences in that instance where it's also a barrier rather than just a?
No, because the fence is measured at top back of curb, because otherwise you could have you got huge, super tall fences.
No, but
It seemed,
I think
That-
talked
we
about
did
in the
do that.
backyard. We talked about.
Yeah.
that's where it came in, is you can't have anything higher than, if a fence is on a retaining wall, that counts as part of the fence, but in an instance where it's below the road, it won't.
And
That was the exception we
And
made.
really the
Okay.
way to think about this is that you have a whole bunch of regulations on fence standards, and then one thing that says, but none of that applies if it's a Clearview train. So it doesn't even matter. Like, even if we
Yeah.
have that provision, you still have nothing can be taller than 2 feet tall, including fences, which is a tripping hazard. I mean, at that point, it's just.
Yeah, I agree that essentially we're just modifying, saying a fence can be 3.5 feet tall in there, which 2 feet makes no sense to have a fence that tall. Like, I don't think you make fences that tall.
I'm going to tell you a story after.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and open the public hearing, so we're not here at midnight. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. If you're here to address us, zone text amendment 2021-5 regarding fence standards, please step up to the mic, state your name and address.
Do we have a mic?
Oh, you can step up to Scott's up so we can get you recorded here.
Just take over.
Yeah. If you want to continue the rest of the meeting over there, welcome to it.
Take over and teach you
Scott's going
multiplication
home.
facts, because I've taught third grade. Probably none of this.
This is geometry, right triangle.
Yes, it is. I'm the property owner of that piece,
And your name?
Linda Lundstrom. You need my address?
Yes, please.
177 East Alberta Drive. The property, my family sold that property to John Hanson. It was an alfalfa field for over 100 years. And the property sloped steeply off the road, off Alberta Drive, and then leveled out into the alfalfa field. When Hanson came in and developed the road, they leveled the road out quite a ways out into the field, which precipitated a retaining wall on the west side of my property, which goes from about a few inches to, a depth of, I don't know, 3.5, 4 feet-ish as it goes back. So I wanted to do a wrought iron fence because I hate chain link. I also adamantly hate vinyl fences. And I found out from the city that in this Clearview triangle, it couldn't be, pardon me, may I take this off? Let's try it. It could not be more than 2 feet high. That was my concern. My basic concern is a little 2 foot, 24-inch high fence with the drop off of that retaining wall, I felt was just a danger. Not only to my husband, who is handicapped in his ability to get around, and he has to use that sidewalk quite a bit for our backyard. But for kids going to school, young kids especially, I could see them trying to jump over it or walk on top of it or ride a skateboard on top of it. I mean, you know what they do, whatever they can think of, they do. So that's my concern. 2 feet just seemed way too low. In a car, you can see well above 2 feet. So that was my take, is let's at least raise it to 3 feet, 3.5 feet. So we've got some protection.
Thank you.
So, ma'am, for your situation, what would be, and we're drafting an ordinance, it's not for your lot.
Right,
okay,
yes.
But it's for the whole city. So-
Yes.
But it helps I can visualize your property, I know right where it is.
Okay.
But what would be your ideal fence if there was no regulations on there? What would you build? What kind of a fence?
I would still build a wrought iron fence.
How high?
Originally, we had planned 6 feet.
So you'd have a 6-foot fence kind of wrapping around your
Yes.
property.
Yes, the west side, the south side, and it will still be 6 feet in the back and up to the Clearview triangle. And then it has to drop to whatever the city decides.
Okay, thank you.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any public on Zoom? John?
No comments.
Okay. That is all our public, so motion to close the public hearing.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second,
Okay, we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
I,
Aye. Any opposed? All right, discussion, motion for recommendation on this item.
I obviously agree that a 2-foot fence it would be a tripping hazard. I think it's just it's gonna be a target for skateboarders. They're gonna go there to rail slide on it and chew it up. I mean, I think anything we can do to draft away from people having to do that. I would support. And then in my other comments, I think I said them, I support anything we do that would encourage nice fences. I think once more people visualize wrought iron fences around, that more people will put them in. I know they're expensive. And so I'd like to see something that allows wrought iron specifically maybe, and not chain link in the ordinance. I don't know if
I
that's,
don't know if we can.
Regulate
mandate
it.
that,
yeah.
But sure you can.
Fences aren't single family homes and regulate, whatever you want on it.
Yeah, well, in my opinion, this is a concession we're giving to an application, and the city could get something out of it in return. And we could say, hey, yeah, we could give on a little bit of the height, as as long as the city's getting back something that's an amenity to the city. Because I think wrought iron fences, even in front yards, I believe enhance the character of the neighborhood and actually increase value. Whereas I think a chain link fence in the front yard or even other materials really detracts from the value. So in my head, it's kind of a compromise we could strike where, yeah, we can give a little on some of this visibility where we're gaining some enhancement to the community. Kind of what I'm thinking.
I'm fine with that if you want to go with it.
I don't know exactly how to word it.
I'll be fine. Hopefully I'm not sitting here when the next applicant comes in and wants to put chain link.
Yeah, I think supporting that is a good idea.
Yeah.
Seems like a lot of people would actually.
Yeah. Now, this particular applicant said that she'd want a 6-foot fence, and I don't think we need to go that necessarily.
Yeah.
Or maybe.
No, but I think it's worth mentioning when we talk about this is, Lauren, do you remember the measurements for the site triangle? I think it quite reduces what from this 40 by 40, right?
It's 230 by 100 foot triangle.
Okay.
That overlap.
And it starts at the asphalt.
Yeah.
And instead of the property line, it's at the top at the curb
Yeah.
next to the vehicle.
So it would have less impact than what this
Yeah.
does. And so maybe if this moves on, the applicant can make note of that. If she wants to get going, but Lauren,
We did measure out both the 40-foot triangle and the 230 by 100 on the property. And there was a small difference, but not a whole lot.
okay.
What are you guys' thoughts about this 50% see-through? It seems like if it was, wrought iron is gonna have a higher like 80 or above, but some of those vinyl fences that had the 50, if you were at just the wrong angle, it might as well have been a solid fence.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind even saying bump that to like 75.
Yeah, that's what I was.
And then we're
thinking.
saying, hey,
And then that kind
We're
of,
really- has anybody ever tried to turn where the O'Reilly's is on 300? You pull out of there. If you look west where all that traffic's coming down 2700,
Mhm.
you cannot see
Yeah.
because that's a chain link fence that's there.
Yeah.
And that's exactly it. You're looking down the fence line because it's right,
Mhm.
you curb and gutter, 6 feet of sidewalk and then a fence, right where the driver's trying to look down the road and you cannot see cars coming.
Wrought iron fences are going to create that same.
No, that fence is the location.
Yeah.
But if it at least was stepped back to the site triangle, you'd be able to see a little bit. But it comes right up to the curb and gutter on both ways sides, so
Well,
that one needs to get put in compliance, code enforcement.
why do the wrought iron is going to have about 90% see through? Why not if they do it vinyl to at least 75% see through, not 50? Create more breakthrough.
I don't know, vinyl at 75% is not gonna have too many slats in it.
No, it would just be like a 1 inch
Oh, little holes.
if it was,
Yeah.
because it's 3.5 foot tall, it may
Yeah, I was
be.
gonna say, why bother with the vinyl?
Running through your yard.
Really, even if your vision is mostly obstructed and you're a driver, I think when you see movement and motion through even the little bit you can see, you may not see the car, you couldn't even tell what make and model of the car it is, but you can probably see, I'm thinking, I don't.
The
I'm not
height
a-
is the
I-
advantage, yeah.
Yeah,
Come says 10, 15, 2600 north, they have absolutely no obstruction, all they still run it.
So do you guys think, just to cut right to it, would it be too restrictive just to say 3.5 feet, wrought iron, 75 or 80% transparent
I like that.
Yeah, that's good.
only. That way it kind of takes all the other materials out.
Or do you specifically say wrought iron, or do you say no chain link 75%? Because then there's very few things that are 75%
Yeah,
outside of chain link.
right.
So then if
Okay.
somebody did want to do a fence that looked like wrought iron but was vinyl, and it was the same size material, they could do it. So we're giving them a little bit more option. But we're saying no chain link rather than saying you can only do this material. We're saying it has to be 75% and can't be chain link.
So chain link, I bother with because weeds for what chain link so easy
Mhm.
Yeah,
and gets it stuck.
Kind of what-
and that's
Commissioner Mason.
that's the reason chain link provides vegetation growth
Mhm.
hazards.
Before we get too far into this, I wouldn't mind hearing if Lauren Gardner had anything to input on this. Do you have any, you can hear the way this is going. Do you have any input for us?
Well, as Eric mentioned, his problem being able to see down 300. I don't have a problem with if it's in the same direction of travel as you are going, such as on 300. It's in the opposite direction is where you have that visibility problem. So when you're looking perpendicular to the fence, that's not an issue. It's no matter what the transparency in the opposite direction, it's going to be almost as if it were a complete solid fence.
So that's
So
where
do
the
we-
height, like, because over there on 300, if that was a 3.5 foot tall fence instead of a 6 foot tall fence, you could at least see cars,
You
but
can see over
6
it.
feet, you can't see
Yeah, but if it's on the right side, you should be able to be 6 feet.
the right side.
No, I think we don't give that kind of words.
Yeah,
No,
I
you're-
mean,
We still got
that
the
one over there, you're
bicycles.
looking across,
You're looking left.
all the way across the road though. So I mean, the fence is
Yeah.
that much further away from you and it's still,
Right.
but that one is because it's only 6 feet behind curb. It's not typically 10 because there's no park strip. Or is there a park strip over there? Whatever.
It is. It's a small part.
You take your life in your hand when you want to come out on 2700.
One thing, when you're looking left at that intersection, that traffic that's coming toward you is in the close lane. If you were looking right, it's all the way across the street. And
Yeah.
so you don't have quite that visibility conflict.
That's what I'm saying. I wonder if, I mean, is that madness to say that they can be on the right side of the, but not the left? Does that even work?
I think that's gonna get too complicated.
Yeah.
But that's where your safety issue comes in. I mean,
Well,
you're.
you know, it's not just cars, it's kids and bikes and.
True.
But the 3.5 foot height limitation does give you some ability to see over more than like the 6 foot fences that are out there.
Yeah,
Okay,
good points, thanks.
discuss enough for recommendation.
Want to kill it or? I'll make a recommendation, which we on number 8.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make a motion to recommend a change of height of the fence to 3.5 fence, wrought iron, or 75 or greater see-through.
We talked about 75% see-through, not chain link, so it could be
Not chain
something
link,
else.
correct, not chain link.
Doesn't have to be wrought iron specifically, but kind of narrowed it into a little pocket.
I did it,
But you specifically excluded chain link from the bill of materials?
yeah.
I'd second that.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any other discussion? All right, Commissioner Arner. Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason.
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancarrow,
Yes,
and I vote yes. All right, that will move on to the city council and they'll.
it's at 75%, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
so did you say that's gonna, the city council wants to hear this before they see our minutes?
Correct. Yeah,
So will you
that's-
just make note of the changes? Okay.
It's scheduled for next meeting.
Okay. All right, we'll be back to our regular scheduled events. Item number 6, zone text amendment 2021-04. Public hearing, consideration, and recommendation on legislative amendment to create site development standards for storage units. That one, I guess we move forward with, even though,
Do we have an applicant representative for this one in the room?
no. Because he's here for the accessory building.
I'm gonna we table item 6 in lieu of the applicant not being present.
Well, the problem is they were here last time,
Oh,
we
yeah,
didn't have a
we-
quorum.
Oh, gotcha.
So he
We
gave
do
his
have it.
presentation to us.
Okay,
And so
I
I
wasn't
would feel
present.
like if we can discuss it if we want, and
I pull my recommendation or my movement, whatever that is. Scratch that.
because it wasn't a site plan or application, it's really. Scott could give us the 411.
Yeah, it's an applicant, it's a zoning text amendment brought forward by an applicant. So it wasn't one that staff was directed by planning commission, council, mayor, or city manager to bring forward. I do think it's important to have the applicant representative here for the conversation, but this is the second time it's been on for a public hearing. So at minimum, I would say we should hold the public hearing, open and close that, and see if there are any members of the public, and then we can discuss. It really was never the intent on that first meeting to have a recommendation. Staff feels like this is a big enough issue that we did want the full planning commission to be able to talk through those issues and provide both staff and the applicant back some recommendations for either amendments or other areas to look at in this code. So happy to do whatever the planning commission wants to do tonight.
I think that would be good. Let's hold the public hearing. This is the second time that it's been advertised, so at least we check that box, and then, like I said, if we feel like making a recommendation, I guess we could, or just wait. So go ahead and present item number 6, zone
Okay.
text amendment 21-4.
This is an applicant from Dan Nixon who owns Lock It Up Storage. This is zoning text amendment 2021-04. Applicable zoning ordinance is to North Ogden City Title 11-8C Planned Manufacturing Zone MP1. This is a legislative decision. And we have an owner of an existing storage unit facility in North Ogden who's applied for this code. The amendment would allow upgrades to existing facilities, not new storage units within the city. The applicant has also provided a draft site plan. This isn't the site plan review, but it has 2 additional storage facilities and an office, as well as a covered parking structure, which would eliminate some of the existing structures that Lock It Up self-storage and build out that site in a different way. So currently, their storage units are not a permitted use in the MP1 zone. We have regulations that revolve around legal non-conforming uses and what you can do to those. Typically, you can rebuild in place if there's a disaster, fire, flood, something like that, but you can't expand a legal non-conforming use. The existing storage units, let's see. As in all legislative applications, the city has wide discretion in considering, approving, or denying these legislative applications. Staff feels like this is an important enough issue that planning commission should identify and consider what issues will affect North Ogden City and help us with recommending something to the city council on this issue. We do think that storage units, well, really any use within the city, it's in the city's best interest to have the best of that type of use possible. So by having these as legal non-conforming and you can't really do anything to them, you can do a new roof, you could reclad them, you could paint them, you can upgrade your asphalt, but you really can't do any other substantive changes there. And in some cases, right now, the market for storage is really, really high. Our housing shortage that we have, there's a lot of people who need storage. And also some of the new storage units that are being built are climate controlled, indoor. They're a little bit more expensive per month, but you get a better product, 24-hour access that's key controlled and video controlled. And so staff is thinking through this in terms of what's best for the city in our ability to make sure that all of our uses are as up to date and high quality as possible, so that we don't lose both revenues or property tax revenues to other communities who are permitting the same type of use. They're also, from just a property tax value or a property value versus income value, they are typically some of the most expensive real estate in your community, meaning that they aren't going to go away. So ignoring them and thinking we'll just let them amortize out for 20 years, you know, they'll just continue to reinvest in them, make sure that they're dry, because once those storage units exist, they're passive, you know, wonderful passive income. So there's a few issues that we do think should be carefully considered, and these aren't all necessarily addressed in the ordinance that was provided by the applicant. One is stormwater mitigation, detention, potential retention, and hardscape coverage, use of low impact or on-site water detention methods. Landscape percentages should be considered. Currently, there's no required percentage of landscaping in the MP1 zone at all. Landscape characteristics, we could talk about xeriscaping versus turf grass, potential for fencing requirements. You could request, you know, require upgraded fencing to be more blocking of views. Displacements of other uses, expansion to additional property of existing operating facilities versus no expansion of the footprint. Professionally designed office requirements. This one would have a Washington Boulevard facing office. And so what requirements does that need to meet? Is that our commercial design standards or others? Outside storage, and then landscaping in the public right of way. So staff is prepared. We have the ordinance for you. And then also based on this application or this issue having come up over the last couple of years, Brandon Bell in our office brought together the notes that had been discussed, and we've attached now to the staff report a summary of past planning commission discussions, which was color coded for you based on those different standards. And that's just an example of some of those things that we could discuss and bring forward as amendments in the code. So with that, I'll see if there's any public comments and we can discuss the item.
Okay. Any discussion before we open public? For public hearing?
I mean, in general, I don't see anything inherently offensive by I've said this in here before, from a storage unit facility. I think it can be structured such that it's not an eyesore. You know, I think the lighting can be regulated. I think the noise can be regulated with our existing ordinances. I know they get a bad rap, but I don't think just the nature of having a storage unit needs to be is offensive to most people. I think, you know, crappy ones would be, but new development, we could legislate and regulate what it looks like. Could be beautiful, really. I mean, you could have a nice, you know, I mean, imagine a wall of trees in front of the facility, something like that, you know, with a sidewalk, meandering sidewalk in front of it to help get the green space requirement. You know, I mean, the applicant could, and I haven't, you know, I guess those are my thoughts, that there's nothing inherently wrong with this type of facility.
This particular applicant, when he presented, seemed interested in that. And he cited some of his other lock-it-up storage facilities, one of which I looked at. It's the lock-it-up facility near the Mercedes-Benz dealership in Farmington, which is close to where I work, and it's great. You know, I think this applicant really does have interest in not only the things that he mentioned, but even the things that, you know, staff has thought about and kind of come back and comment on tonight. And I think that there's possibility to look at the way we have our ordinance drafted, and I think the applicant would be helpful, honestly, in making steps in that direction. And it's a fairly visible part of our city, this particular area.
Yeah, and I think what's key is a couple of things both Commissioner Mason and Webb have mentioned is, you know, this applicant wants to upgrade their existing facility to make it nicer. And, you know, like Commissioner Mason said, storage units aren't particularly offensive, but not well maintained ones can be kind of nuisance looking, I guess. And that's what he's asking, that we create an ordinance to get away from that.
Yeah.
But right now, as Scott said, a facility owner cannot upgrade their facility because it's not in the ordinance. And so we're creating an ordinance for those to upgrade. We're not creating an ordinance to allow storage units. You know, it's basically the ones that we do have, if somebody would like to upgrade.
Wasn't there a blanket moratorium though in the city on them? I thought.
It was just removed altogether from.
Yeah.
From an allowed use.
Yeah.
And my daughter's used that storage unit, it does, need to be upgraded real bad. It's to the point it almost be better just let it fall down.
Yeah, he had mentioned that there's two facilities over there,
Right,
and he had bought the one, I don't know how long ago, but then after they had owned and operated it for a while, they were able to buy the other one directly behind Mrs.
Correct.
Kavanaugh's. And that's what they want to upgrade is, upgrade the facades, upgrade the landscaping, put their office out on the corner.
but it's a good place for the storage
So-
units.
So
Really fits well.
the issue brought up by city staff is real, and that is that they're by and large a bunch of blacktop, right? So low impact design is gonna be difficult and water retention, but it's really no different than a big box grocery store. I mean, what is that? A building and a bunch of asphalt around it, right? So, I mean, we had to enforce those standards across the board. And, I don't see
Yeah.
this as-
And like this in a retrofit, they may not be able to go back because they got buildings and things, facilities that they can't go in and say, hey, we can now capture what a new design would require. But they could definitely improve on what they've got. So that's something we have to look at, but
The applicant's recommendation is 10% of the gross site, and I believe our CP2 or commercial zones are 20% of the area in landscaping, so a little less than some of those large commercial areas that we have, but 10% on this particular site would pick up a lot of landscaping. It isn't-
so you're saying if they're gonna do anything with the facility, the entire facility then comes in compliance with the 10% rule. So right now, if it has 0,
Yeah.
and they want to replace their RV storage with an actual building, then they bring all 5 acres up to a 10% landscaping requirement, which is huge compared to just adding a little building and some landscaping. So that's a benefit to the city.
Absolutely.
And then I know this particular applicant, which will come with the site, is they have interest in improving the creek there, or he had mentioned deeding their, I guess, the creek that's along the south side, so commissioners know as he presented, they own to the center of that creek, Coldwater Creek, and the city owns the other half. So they talked about even deeding, to the entire creek into the city, so the city can maintain it, and whether they upgrade it and make it nice, and then the city owns it, continues to own it after that, rather than having shared ownership of the banks.
Could
of
that be part of
creek.
their landscaping?
Yeah, and I think that's something where in my mind, you would say, hey, we know you're deeding this 20 feet of your property over to the city, but we're gonna count that towards your landscaping, because if you didn't, it would be counted towards it, and then that improvement and things. So I think that's specific to a site plan, so it's not necessarily specific to the city in general in this ordinance, but we do only have 2 storage facilities in the city, so.
I think there's some concrete in the creek in that area and stuff. I mean, I think there's some work that needs to be done,
Yeah,
so.
it could be good, but. So let's go ahead and open the public hearing so we don't have any, well, we do have a couple of public, so. Let's open the public hearing for zone text amendment. I lost where we're at here, 2021-4. Storage standards for storage units. If anybody in the public would like to address us, please step up to the mic and state your name and address. Anybody on Zoom?
Nope.
Okay.
Nobody on Zoom or nobody wants to,
No comments.
just curious.
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I think we've discussed this pretty well. I think anything really further in detail would be helpful to have the applicant for this with us. So everybody's kind of keeping in mind a little, I think we kind of covered the things that he talked about when he was here the last meeting, some of the things and the desires. If you look, he does have his proposed site plan, what he wants to do, so you can see that they do want to improve the facility. But some things to think about, I know between now and when they do come, is one of the things is, would we want to allow a building to be along property line to be a barrier rather than the fence? So he's got a fence along 2000 North right now, and he would like to put that as a back of a building to act as the fence and a barrier, so people on the track with landscaping, but on that property line, he would put, if you look in the thing, rather than having a fence that you just look through and see into the facility. So that's one thing to consider is with storage units, we allow a building to be a property line fencing or barrier.
So are we doing this in the wrong order if we allow a public hearing tonight and then essentially take no action on the item tonight and then make a recommendation to city council at a future meeting? Are we stepping out of our own protocol there?
No,
And that's not disingenuous to the public either? in your opinion?
no,
Okay.
they were mailed, we mailed notices to all property owners of MP1, or all property owners adjacent to MP1 properties, as well as those property owners of MP1 property.
Okay.
Highlighting the last meeting, we did receive some public who came there. We notified them that this would be bumped to 2 weeks, reposted on our website, on the Utah Public Meeting Notice website of the public hearing. And after you've satisfied that requirement, then you're good. And typically, just by practice, the city council permits the public to make comments on those items, even though by state code, this is really where we have satisfied the public hearing requirement.
Yeah, and I think just important to make note, so it is on the record. We did take public comment last time. We just didn't do a public hearing. There were 2 public besides the applicant that spoke. One was in favor of cleaning up the creek there and in favor of adding landscaping to storage units and in favor of buildings to, instead of fences, to kind of enclose it. And the other was, their concern was really the open storage.
Yeah.
Looking down on open storage. They weren't by the lock it up, they were over by Bach, I guess, and they looked down onto the RV, their open storage that's there. And their concern was that, that we, are we gonna allow more of that? And this was kind of the, I guess make sites a little bit more restrictive than currently are. So if somebody wants to upgrade, it's a little more restrictive, but they both were in favor of something to improve sites if people want to come in. Just so I know they're not here to make comment tonight, but that was the comments that were made last time.
Excellent, very helpful, thanks. Well, I still move that we table item 6 for,
Okay.
And make no recommendation tonight in lieu of the applicant not being here.
Do you just, sorry to interrupt you during that motion, but do you have any specific recommendations for something that staff can look at for either amendments to this or specific key items that you're interested? That could be stormwater retention, percentages of open space, just to give us some guidance to help.
I would like to see, just simply because upgrading something like this to say, hey, we to storm drain retention, I think 10% is probably good. Because something is better than nothing. And I don't know what the other facility that's in the city is a lot newer than this one, but so it may have some, but I don't know what currently. I think we determined that it probably goes into some type of oil water separator and then dumps out into the storm drain system of the city, and there's not really anything. So something is better than that. And I think a 20% probably then almost becomes one of those things that's so much that how do you do, you're tearing up so much of the facility trying to accomplish that it becomes a deterrent to improve the place. And I would be open to, the landscape adjustment, with this place is, hey, you're improving landscaping, what things kind of become a trade-off rather than sticking to straight percentages. I'm in favor of buildings to enclose a facility rather than a solid fence or a fence on public where they border, I guess you'd say public property or right away. But really anywhere I think I don't see a nuisance to have a building, even if there's people who live next to the property. And rather than a fence, it's a wall of a building.
So that's pretty common in zero lot line development. And one way that you get away from the just blank wall aspect is requiring fenestration in the wall of certain amounts. And we require that in our commercial sites. The applicant shows, at least on that road out there on 2000, that you would have some kind of, the building wouldn't just be one.
Yeah, there's some
solid
step-ins where there
mass.
can be some landscaping.
Yeah, some stepping in the building, and that just visually breaks it up. It becomes not just a monotonous 100-foot long wall. So we can review some
standards for these types of buildings that are, you know, wall fenestrations or stepping in the building.
I think that'd be good.
I don't know, did we address heights, like anything bordering a property line or zero lot line is 1 story?
Probably not, and I don't think I would on Washington, even going down 2000. But I'm a fan of the street wall, you know, having like a street wall presence.
You mean,
Yes.
you would say you're fine with 2 stories along the street
Yeah.
instead of
And
1?
you know, you might require something like, the thing that makes those really imposing are when they have no glass. Like they don't have this idea of like visual transparency and seeing into that building, because then it just feels like this big block against the back of the property. Yeah, we'll have to think about that on what's kind of right in the context of the area, because the cannery building is an example of a building that at some sections is probably 30 feet tall, and it's built right at the back of their property line, back of sidewalk. But it has some old, you know, they just used to build buildings this way because they didn't have the lighting we have today. They've got a lot of glass.
Well, originally wasn't built back a sidewalk either.
It was built on property.
When it was built back, it did have a setback.
But it was built on property lines. The setback was forced just by the fact that it was like a 2-lane dirt road in front of it when that was constructed. But we used to permit buildings to be built on property lines and go straight up. And windows were just they were more of a function of like life safety in the building. You could open them up and have air ventilation and light than what we have now with air handling units and really good indoor lighting.
Lots of old main streets are that way.
Okay,
My motion stands to table the item.
no, he just asking for some direction
Yeah,
to narrow down.
Yeah, but don't we have to
100
either,
of the
we either
items.
have to,
Yes,
we have to do something with this.
yes.
And I say we do nothing with this.
You're tabling the discussion for the recommendation, but not tabling the
Well,
public
that's my
hearing.
motion.
You're not tabling the public hearing?
I'm not tabling the public hearing.
The public
Okay.
hearing was closed
Okay.
at 7:30.
I'm saying that we take no action tonight.
Yeah. Do we have a second on the motion?
I'll second.
A motion and a second to table. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, item 7, zone text amendment. You've satisfied your need for class if you don't want to stay.
He's eating
longer.
this up. I can tell.
So-
I can see it in your eyes. You know. You're gonna be a public planner.
Item number 7, zone text amendment 2019-6. Public hearing, consideration and recommendation on a legislative amendment to reorganize North Ogden Code Title 11 and 12. On that note, just reading this, we have had, well, I'm just trying to see where we're at here. Oh, item number 9, we do have an applicant here or a interested party in this item. Do we want to bump them ahead of the Title 11
I
and
move
12?
if we do have an interested party, I move we.
All in favor to move on to item 9 prior to 7?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. We'll hit the zone text amendment 2021-6. This is a public hearing and consideration and recommendation on a legislative amendment to accessory building heights and size requirements. Presenter will be Brandon Bell.
I'm just gonna draw a couple quick graphics really quick to illustrate some concepts that we'll be discussing. in the report.
Those markers, man, like the day you buy them, you get that stuff all over your hands. And then every day after that is, they don't work.
Good evening, Chair and Commission. So as most of us know, we've adjusted the ordinance relating to accessory buildings for a number of times in the last few years. There was a request that came from the council asking staff to consider standards for heights, as well as for the commission to consider for standards regarding heights and square footage for accessory buildings. There's a pending building permit application and concerns about the city ordinance on the topic of accessory buildings were raised in the process of that application being reviewed. What I'm gonna do in this staff report, maybe a little bit different than in the past, is just kind of give philosophical set of arguments about the different ways to look at the issue of accessory buildings, to provide different things to consider as you make a recommendation on this ordinance. So the staff's opinion regarding the current ordinance is that overall the current ordinance has struck a relatively good balance between the rights of property owners desiring to build an accessory building unit and the rights and interests of neighboring property owners who are often impacted by those accessory buildings. We've reviewed a few codes from different cities in the region. We would say that the city's current ordinance is somewhat more detailed compared to other city ordinances, but on the other hand, those ordinances in other cities may not sufficiently consider the impact of accessory buildings on neighboring property owners. Ours tend to be more restrictive than others generally, but there's more than one issue and one side to view things from. The staff in North Ogden City has received concerns over the years, both directly from neighbors who have been impacted by excessively sized accessory buildings or other issues relating to accessory buildings such as heat being transferred onto their property and into their building. Applicants, but we've also received concerns and complaints from applicants desiring to build an accessory building on their property and not feeling like they could build a sufficiently sized accessory building. So staff's of the opinion that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution, but there is a reasonable range of solutions that are based on principles that seek to balance and maintain the rights of all affected parties. Staff believes that the valid interests of neighbors on this topic revolve around the issues of the height of the building, especially in relation to the distance of that building from the property line, or in other words, the higher the wall that's closer to the property line, the bigger of a deal it is. The farther away that wall is from the property line, the less of an impact it is on a neighbor, and therefore it should be able to be higher. The same thing would also apply to a sloped roof. So preventing this, then other issues that staff believes are relate to the neighbors' interests are not having excessive heat reflected or radiated onto their property, and let's see. Oh, and then a certain amount of light, or just a reasonable amount of light entering their property, and not having that light blocked, or having the view blocked entirely. There's also the issue of noise that can take place, but that's addressed by our noise ordinance. And then let's see. One issue that has been addressed in the most recent change to the ordinance in 2020 is the issue of design and using similar design and materials. The use of metal buildings was reduced quite significantly as part of that last ordinance related to design and materials. And there's requirements that were put in that stated that the design of the building needs to be very similar to the home. And so we feel like that's probably been sufficiently addressed. That's not in the amendment that's currently being considered as part of this item. That issue of design, for the most part, is not being addressed to be changed. There's a couple of related ordinances that we think should be considered as the commission considers accessory buildings, and those relate to our standards for accessory dwelling units and our standards for single family homes. And so with accessory dwelling units, they are allowed to follow the same setback as the homes, which means, let's say in an R110 zone, they can be 10 feet away from the side property line and 20 from the rear. They can also be 25 feet tall currently, which is taller than what an accessory building can be. So, and then the other thing is that the rear setback of a home is 20 feet in most of these zones, and it can be up to 35 feet tall. Now, let me point out one factor. We're sort of used to most, the vast majority of homes, when we think of a 35-foot tall height limit, we tend to visualize a home that has a sloped roof. But technically, the way our ordinance is written, if this is, the rear property line is here and this is 20 feet, depending on the style of roof or home that you choose, the home could technically, by ordinance, be 35 feet tall. So we have someone that modified a home, that got a permit, and they built a front with of their home that was flat, and you can kind of see that. So my point is even though it doesn't rarely happen, property owners are currently within their rights to have a 35-foot structure at this point, 20 feet from their property line. With an accessory dwelling unit, let's say that this is, we'll say that this is 25 feet right here. And, they could technically have an accessory dwelling unit that's 20 feet from their rear property line. And if this were the side property line, it'd be 8 or 10 feet depending on the zone. So most people aren't going to build a flat roof just based on preferences, but it's technically possible. So it's important to bring that up and recognize there are other types of buildings that can be taller and yet also closer to the property line. It's just, we're not trying to push you in that direction, but we want to bring up as much perspective as we can for you to consider the issue. So what staff thinks the core issue is that the building, as long as the height of an accessory building should be able to increase the farther away from the property line that it gets, and that an increase in the size of an increase in the height of the building should be permitted in order to meet both the needs of the property of the owner and of the accessory building and the neighbors, and that's a correct balance. And so let me draw one more graphic. Usually try to get these drawn beforehand. So what the proposed ordinance essentially says is that if you follow a line like this, the taller the building gets, the further back you need to move it from the property line. And regarding this issue of views and light, if you think about this as a rear, like if you just think of property as a cube instead of just like looking down on a flat, and this is the two shared rear property lines where two rear yards meet, we sort of think that you have a right to have a certain amount of air and light come through from the opposing rear yard, if that makes sense. So that, not that that right is absolute and that shouldn't be blocked at all, but that there should be a certain amount of view, et cetera. And so that's why we're proposing this idea that we already have this idea in our code. We're just sort of simplifying it, that we just say, you go up a foot, the walls go back a foot. You go up another foot, the walls go back another foot. So up to a maximum of 25 feet is what the current ordinance would do if you decide that an increase in height is appropriate. And then I think that summarizes that issue. But
So on that, while you're talking about that,
yes,
am I reading the ordinance right, that 1-to-1 ratio starts at 3 feet from the property line?
yes, with
Okay.
A 10-foot
With
wall.
starting at 10 feet.
Yes,
At 3 feet, it's 10 feet. So a 25-foot tall building is 18 feet from property line.
that's correct.
Okay.
So, and we already have a similar setup. We just realized, okay, we think it's easier to just create this small formula for it. So right now, what the current ordinance is it says, if the building's 10 tall, it needs to be 3 feet away from property line. If it's 11 to 15 feet tall, it needs to be 8 feet from property line. And if it's 15 to 20, then it needs to be, I think it's 15 feet from the property line. So right now, it's the same principle, but it goes like this. So instead of more like that, so it just makes the same.
Smooth it out.
Yeah, so. And the idea is that that would simplify the current ordinance and provide a little bit more flexibility for property owners wanting to build an ADU without overly burdening or overly impacting the neighbors. The next issue here is that we're suggesting that we keep the requirement that they not take up greater than 25% of the rear yard or 35% of the lot in combination with any other buildings on the lot. And that, but we are recommending that one of the, there's a provision in the ordinance that states that the maximum square footage for the building should be tied to the square footage of the home. Staff is recommending that that actually be eliminated from the ordinance. And the reason why is if you have, say, an acre property and you bought a property that has a home that was built, say, in the 1940s, it's just an older home, and they tend to have smaller footprints. What our suggestion is you're being penalized because you bought a property that has a smaller home to not be able to enjoy the same property right for an accessory building as someone else, when in fact that you're essentially saying, okay, well, we have a small home, so we shouldn't have a large accessory building like everyone else can build on their property. What we're saying is that you should just have a flat limit for the accessory, the maximum size of the accessory building, which we're proposing is 1,250 square feet. And that's 250 square feet than the smallest maximum in the RE20 zone, which is 1,500 feet, right? And I believe that's for RE20 properties that are smaller than an acre. I may not have that exactly right, but I believe it's.
I wouldn't mind discussing that number. Did you come in our discussion portion? Did you grab that from some other standard or?
Where well, I took it. I mean, no, I didn't grab it from some other like city, if that's what you're asking. But we basically looked at the RE20 zone, said that okay, well, it's 1,500 in a similar situation here, but we're also not dealing with RE20 properties, which are tending to be larger. And so it just seemed about the right range to come up with. It's not a magic number, it's not necessarily like, the one pure truth on this topic. It was just our best suggestion. So,
okay. And then correct me, this is an ordinance governing, or the overall ordinance for accessory buildings, not for an accessory building in a zone, right?
This is specifically for the R1 zones.
For the R1 zones. Okay.
Modifying it, what the RE20 stays the same.
Got it.
Yes, this would not, as proposed, affect the RE20 zones or the HP1 zones, which there's an email that someone emailed about. I actually didn't get time to read it, but I am aware that it came in. Scott may have an ability to summarize that.
Okay, I'd like to discuss that in the discussion once you finish the room.
Okay. So we do believe that the 25% rear yard maximum should stay in place because we believe that there's important functions of a softscape of vegetation in your rear yard, including on-site drainage of the property, as well as helping preserve an open fill in residential zones and making sure that we don't overload our stormwater system. So those serve, it's essentially an ecological service that the yard provides. So oh, go ahead.
That's sort of covered in the fact that you said it can only be 20% of the lot and those kind of things, right? I mean,
yeah,
so there's a little bit of overlap with those.
Overlap with.
I guess I'm just saying there's some of our other. I should really hold this off for the discussion portion, but I just feel like we have existing standards that govern how big the building can be naturally, because an accessory building can't take up 90% of the lot, even if you do have that house that was built in 1940.
So I was referring to the existing standard that we believe that should stay in place, not suggesting we have a new one. Fair enough. Thanks. So, what the attached ordinance does is it brings the code somewhat closer to uniformity for different types of buildings. Those three different types of buildings are accessory buildings, accessory dwelling units, and the main dwelling or the home. They're not perfectly the same still, but we're using more similar logic and more similar standards for those three different types of buildings. And the commission should decide whether they believe that those can be reasonably compared, whether we're not assuming that the standards should be the same. It's our view that they would have similar impacts, but that topic is definitely open for debate. So
I have a question. You call similar impacts, I mean by size or height?
size is an impact, but for instance, someone could argue that there's more likely to be loud noises in an accessory dwelling unit that's close to the property line because someone likes to play their rock music or whatever else. But you could also argue, okay, it's more likely that it's going to happen in an accessory dwelling unit when someone is using their bandsaw or whatever else. So the intent behind these potential adjustments is to simplify the ordinance as proposed. And we're not recommending that the ordinance be changed. What we're recommending is if you feel that it's worth changing and you think it should be changed, that these are some good recommendations to do that as the proposed ordinance. So their intent is to simplify the ordinance. And if there's the height increase is definitely open for debate. We're not recommending that it go to 25 feet, but we think that it's a reasonable standard if you do decide to increase that height. And the other intent of the ordinance is to take into consideration, balance, and meet the interests and reasonable concerns of both property involved, or the property owners wanting to build the ADU and their neighbors. We're trying to do our best to not compromise or harm either of those property owners. Staff is of the opinion that these adjustments, if recommended by the commission, keep the ordinance within a reasonable range of balancing those differing property interests and different property owners. And let's see, there's the general plan addresses this and stating that we should assure that North Ogden remains a beautiful place to live, work, and recreate, and preserve the essential characteristics of a family-friendly community that assures an enduring legacy, small town feel, and high quality of life in North Ogden. Staff does believe that the proposed code amendment can be found to be in conformance with the general plan, but we also believe that the existing ordinance meets the intent of the general plan as well. The Planning Commission should determine if an increase in height to 25 feet for accessory buildings and the other adjustments in the ordinance sufficiently balance the interests of these differing property owners, both those desiring to build an accessory building and their neighbors' interests. I will just really quickly, in the ordinance, we made some adjustments to the proposed ordinance this afternoon. None of them that I recall were substantive. They were just formatting from the version that we received in their in the packet. I believe that John has pulled up that newer version of the ordinance. They were just trying to help work with our city recorder to make sure that the changes would transfer smoothly into the city code. I just want to be really clear and try and review what we've done in the ordinance, because we've taken two sections that address a formula for the max. There's a formula for the maximum height of the roof, which is tied to the height of the main building. We've eliminated that and proposed it be replaced with this 1-to-1 ratio formula for the height of the roof. And then we've also eliminated another formula and just said, we think it's easier to just do 1,250 square feet. On both of those, the challenge with both of those that we're proposing to be eliminated is that they're a custom solution for every property. There's no flat number where you can just say, it's either 1,200 feet and it meets it or it doesn't meet it, right? And so you're creating a custom set of rules, and particularly with building, it can be very hard to And also much more expensive for a property owner to build, say, a 21 by 32 building versus a 20 by 30 or something like that, right? There's stock plans for this size and this size, and it just makes them hard for them to not be able to, they have to go get custom architecture, engineering, stuff like that. So, and it also creates a lot of work for staff to try and figure out exactly, okay, this person gets a 600 square foot building, but this person gets a 720, and to make sure you get that formula right every time, et cetera. So the other item that I want to bring up that I really feel like, I want to make sure that we brought all this to the surface so that you can make sure that you had a fair, open conversation about it, and you don't find out later that, we forgot to mention something and like, oh, staff snuck us by, right? So we certainly don't want to be guilty of that. And there is one that we are proposing, that we're proposing be eliminated, which is a standard that says building separation. Large accessory building to be 60 feet from any neighboring dwelling on an adjoining parcel. Now this one, all of this is obviously up to debate and figuring out if that's the right thing to do. Staff's point of view on this is that, again, we're trying to get away from customized solutions. And the point being that if they have to be 18 feet from a property line, if it's say a 25-foot building, then the intent of that setback is to look out for the neighbor's interest, right? So it's not too close, right? But the challenge with the current standard is that it's a custom solution for every situation, number one. But even more than that, it's telling a property owner that what they can do on their property is determined by what's happening on another property.
Who comes first?
Right? And that's the practical result is ends up being who comes first, so that not everyone's enjoying the same set of property rights in similar situations. And so if the way I put it in another version of the staff report that we're preparing for the council is that that the setback and the rules are determined by what's happening on the property that's being built, not by an offsite condition that they don't have any control over. You can, if that's not what you feel comfortable with, then you can make a recommendation against the ordinance, certainly. And if this general paradigm of trying to remove these formulas that may cause a custom solution for everyone, if you are in support of those, then certainly that's an option to keep those in as well. From staff's perspective, we're trying to reach a similar result with this potential ordinance, but in a way that's much more simple, so that and also so that more people can build a similar size building on their property without having these custom rules and someone coming in and say, well, my neighbor got to build, this size of building. How come my own can build one that's 2/3 the size, et cetera? So I've tried to summarize that clearly. I don't know if I succeeded, but if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them to try and make it more clear.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Brandon before we open for public hearing? Do you want to have any discussion prior to?
As you probably heard in there, just for a discussion item, I don't love the number 1250. I realize this is for our R1 zones, and our E20 would have a different standard. But when I think back to the coolest accessory buildings I've been in, they've had basketball courts in them and full size ones. And I think of another shop over in Pleasant View that doesn't really fit in either. It's not smaller than the one in Pleasant View is one of those stills where it's a teeny house and a big shop in the back. And that was the allure to the, and I don't know the zoning in Pleasant View. I don't know what the zone it was in, but I just feel like if we put this in here, we're going to get an application in the future where somebody wants to go 1255, 1300 feet. And then are we just going to keep moving the stick? And so part of me just thinks, I mean, yeah, I understand why we're cutting out the limitation of being 1/2 the square footage of the main building. I get that, because some accessory buildings are cool and they're big and they're not a deterrent. But I feel like the other provisions of this ordinance, being a percentage of the lot, the setbacks, everything self-governs the size of the building enough that we don't need to put a number in there. I mean, we can. It's not. I just feel like there's going to be, and I've heard of horror stories of residents having to And having a big lot and having to cut wanting to build a big shop or a big shed, a barn, and have to cut it in two and build two units to satisfy, so they didn't have one building that was X number of square feet.
I think the height issue is actually more of a potential issue for the neighbors than the footprint issue. You know, if it's a lower building, that's not, I mean, I think that, you know, the point was brought up that it could be a big, tall, square shop building. That's, to me, that's a little bit more of an issue than a property owner who has a certain percentage of their land that allows like light and airflow for the neighbor to kind of come through. So I'm good with the non-1250 and maybe even thinking about, I want to make sure that these buildings aren't too high so that someone puts a big building, they want to put a big building, but it's super tall and it's, you
Well,
know,
also
that's kind of
smooths it
imposing
out
for the neighbor.
because having it in steps like that is somewhat limiting.
Totally.
But, and it doesn't serve the purpose. I mean, in what we're doing with this ordinance, I'm very much in favor, and I think it needs to, I do think we should recommend this to the city council. I just think we could I think we could cut that 1250 square feet out. I don't think it, and I heard Brandon's argument that, well, hey, you know, we have to, and I'm all about streamlining the process for staff as well, as everyone knows, but, you know, they already have to do all these other measurements. Is it X% of the lot? And do they have enough green space? And so they're already doing that. And now they just, this is, to me, one more measurement that they have to make. And I did the math here. You know, I have 1,250 square feet. You've got a 50 by 25 building. So I know a lot of people around here play basketball in Peterson's gym out there. That's definitely bigger than that. Now he's got a great big lot, and he's probably not in an R110 zone. But we've got a couple of places in the city where those things work, and I just think it'd be cool to. We've already got building material standards. There's just going to be so much self-enforcement of this anyway. I feel like it governs itself without having to say limited to 1,250 square feet. That's my thought.
I would agree with you. I think we have to look back at why we created this. And, you know, like anything, we're addressing it now because we have an applicant that says, hey, I don't fit in the box you made. Let's readjust the box. We made the box because we had somebody in the city who said, hey, my neighbor's got a big building behind it and I don't like it. We can't let that go on in the city. And so we created this box to try and fit everybody in. And I think at the end of the day, when you look at it and say, what is the intent? And we can't necessarily address this, in my opinion, by zone. It really should be addressed by property size, because you can have a 1 acre lot in an R110 zone.
Yep.
And that 1 acre lot could then have a bigger accessory building on it and fit into the neighborhood than, let's say, a 10,000 square foot lot that's got a 2,000 square foot building on it. That might seem a little bit big, but a 2,000 square foot building on a 1 acre lot in that same zone is going to fit right in. It's not going to fit oversized. And so I think the whole intent here is we're trying to say this and say, hey, well, is 1,250 the right size? Is that fair for everybody? And blah, blah, blah. Well, that might be if everybody had a 10,000 square foot lot in an R110 zone, but that's not what it is. I mean, the code, for example, is HP1, HP2, which is 12,500 square feet lots. Their smallest lot up there, I think, is 18,000 square feet. So do you say, oh, well, if you're governed by an R1 zone, you know, it's your same governance as a 10,000 foot lot when nobody has one that small. So at the end of the day, we got to think more property size than we think zone. And that's what's hard, is saying, hey, in my opinion, almost throw the zone rule out of this and just say, you know, look, it's based on property. If you can have a 2,000 square foot building in an RE20 because you got over an acre, why can't the guy that has over an acre that's in an R110 zone have that same right?
The one pushback I would have on that is I think the 20 zone, a traditional ag zone, is a little different. I think you've got, you know, farm property still that's here, and I think there's some historic stuff there that's important to consider. And there are people who still want to farm.
But
things.
Agriculture is a whole different. An agriculture building doesn't count in this.
Yeah,
ordinance.
but the RE20 zone is a traditional ag zone.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
I'm just saying, I think keeping the RE20 zone, I think lumping it in here probably isn't a good idea, because
But what you're saying, but an RE20 zone is limited to 1,500 square feet
I have
as a building
question.
size.
When we did we take into account for the ag zone, be a little different.
Yeah, if it's a barn or something for agriculture, it's not counted in the same.
This
size
is only for
requirement.
R1 zones,
We took
correct?
that into account when we put this together. So that could be taken into account for that cultural type thing. It could do larger. But I like the percentage to that 1,200, whatever it is. Hasn't really just done this. When we did that thing, that person complained about the building next to him wasn't the size of the building, if I remember right, it was the height of the building that created a problem.
Yeah,
You
So,
know, I kind of agree with the height more than
I do
the
too.
area, and I like the percentage like you guys are talking about, but I think 25 feet is too high. In an R1 zone, what possible purpose would you need a 25-foot shed for outbuilding? I mean, I could see like 20 feet, yeah, you're gonna put an RV under there or something, but you know, at 25 feet, I like this graduated setback with the height. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I like, you know, the rest of the changes, but 25 feet I think is too much. And I think 20 feet is still probably,
And views are.
More
relaxed
than
in this
adequate.
community.
and that does address, you know, the neighbors and the concerns that we've heard so many times about these accessories.
so the give and take of this though is their staff's proposing, or this, I don't know if the staff or I don't know who drafted this, but adjusting the height from 20 feet to 25 feet. But they're saying that it's gonna be set back so far. Would you not give up the 5 feet? To the-
25-foot outbuilding, why would you need that in an R1 zone? That sounds
Well, if you
crazy.
think about like my dad had a motor in the 80s, he had a motor home and it had these great big cargo storage things on the top. You put it in a shed that had a pitched roof, he's over 25 feet at that point.
Or what about like
I
a
just,
garage
but this,
that has
this
an
is
office
what's
above it
created so
or
much
something?
animosity
Yeah.
between these are the issues that we have heard about these sheds, so, you know.
Yeah.
but the height is the issue relative
height
to
is
how
the-
close it is to the property line.
Yeah. When it moves further away from the property line, it does become less obstructive because you have some
So
distance.
the one, I guess I would address the 20 feet versus 25 feet. A lot of people who build accessory buildings may want to park their RV in it. You need a 14-foot tall garage door in that. And so if you're going to put a pitched roof on that, if you have a 14-foot tall garage door, requires a 16-foot tall ceiling, that leaves you 4 feet to put a pitched roof over top of the building.
I think that's how we came up with 20
So
in the
that's where,
last go
that's where
around.
20 is like, that's pretty tight. When you look at, you know, I know my dad's garage, it was an example in there, which everybody was fine with. And his is 24 feet tall. Because it has a 8-12 pitch roof on it.
It doesn't
It
seem
looks
that way.
like the house.
Right.
And so everybody's like, oh, that's fine. Well, it's like, well, that's taller than what the ordinance is now. And because it was built before this ordinance was in place.
And Brennan, I
disclaimer.
think I did see on the end of this ordinance draft that there was, you did address the roof slope. Didn't you
Yeah.
make a change to the roof slope
We
requirement?
did, and thank you for mentioning it. I realized that was the one thing that I didn't cover that.
Which may address that.
So hopefully we don't get distracted from what you're talking about, but what we're suggesting is that, I believe we actually addressed this in the code update. I don't remember, if we wrote it exactly the same way, but we're suggesting that the 412 roof pitch shouldn't apply to buildings that are 200 square feet or smaller. One of the reasons for that is that most of those buildings are prefabricated. They're tough sheds or another brand of shed that's built that someone picks up from Lowe's. And there are many of those models that aren't 412. And so it kind of, if we actually enforce that, it forces property owners to get a custom building built.
Yeah, the roof pitch applies to large accessory buildings over 200 feet.
Currently, it applies to all.
No, that's what you're proposing,
But that's
is
what we're
it's just
saying.
really on the bigger ones.
And we feel like that's much more reasonable. Because, basically, if you go by this, there's a lot of tough sheds you can't go by technically and put in your yard, if you're gonna follow city ordinance. And again, going back to this idea of balancing rights of different property owners, the impact of an 8x10 shed, having a 412 roof pitch, I don't think that really impacts a neighbor, to have, if it has less than a 412 roof pitch, so.
So looking at all these numbers, what do you think the actual temperature is in here? 20, 25 degrees? Is everybody like, I'm a big, fat, hairy guy and I'm sitting here freezing. Right? Is there?
And I think
I'm like, it's not not like I'm in a tank top either.
Well, let's continue this discussion, but I know we have a person of the public here that's here for the public hearing. So let's go ahead and have the public hearing and then continue this discussion. So at this time, let's go ahead and open the public hearing for Zone Text Amendment 2021-6, amendment to accessory building heights and sizes. If you'd like to address us, please step up to the mic and state your name and address this time. Thank you. Where Brandon is here at this desk, that other one isn't plugged in.
So my name is Greg Wall with Avenue Consultants, and the company address is 6605 South Redwood Road in Taylorsville. And we weren't the applicant that requested the changes, but it affects some of the projects we're working on. And I did not read through the draft beforehand, but I appreciate the staff looking through and considering a lot of those things, because it addresses a lot of the concerns that we had when we go to draw a civil plan, a site plan to show where an accessory building could go. There were 4 different kind of standards. The first was the terracing up from the property line. The second was the 60 feet from other dwelling units. Then we had to do the formula with the land area ratio, and then the formula with the height. And as Brandon stated it, the former formulas would penalize a 2-story home for having a smaller footprint on the square footage, but then it would penalize a rambler home with the formula on the height because it was shorter. So I like what's been proposed to kind of smooth the line, and I think that that's a good idea. Eliminating the 60 feet from the dwellings on other lots, I also think is wise. The rear setback on a home is 20 feet, so homes can be 40 feet apart, but to have 60 feet to the accessory building was tricky to make sites work with that. And I do agree that the height in relation to the property line is a bigger factor than overall height in general. And so I like that smooth line. As the building gets taller, it needs to be farther from the property line. So it allows someone with a larger property to build a larger accessory building without diminishing the views or casting a shadow on their neighbor's property. So I appreciate what's been done. I think as far as designing for our clients, it would be beneficial. One item that I would maybe bring up is, and Brandon may need to clarify, there was something about a percentage of rear yards. And I know in one of the iterations of the layouts we did, the home was considered by the municipal code to have 2 front and 2 rear yards and no side yards. And so if it's an L-shaped or an odd-shaped property, I think it would be wise not to limit it just to what's considered a rear yard. If it was a big enough property and it was to the side, I think it could still be appropriate. So anyway, those are my comments, but I appreciate getting the clarification so we can design to the standards. And I think that these updates will be beneficial to lots of property owners.
Can I ask the question while you have the mic? Sure. So if you were designing property for, let's say we with this ordinance were implemented and we have an accessory building on a lot that fit this ordinance, maybe up to the boundaries that we've set, right? Would you, and you're then coming in and trying to sell or design homes next to it, do you see any adverse effects to the neighbors there? So now the inverse of this, right? Because you're trying to build something to put on it, but I'm saying they're already there. Now you're trying to build neighboring houses
next to it.
So
I appreciated that Brandon drew the different, an accessory dwelling unit and a home. If the rear setback on a home, which I believe can be what's the height restriction on the home, 30?
35.
35. So you can have a home that's 35 feet tall, 20 feet off the property line. To have a accessory building that's 25 feet tall, that would need to be 18 feet off the property line. It's 10 feet shorter and only 2 feet closer. So the home is actually going to look more imposing than the accessory building. So I wouldn't be concerned about it, as, you know, if we were laying out lots and putting the footprints of the home on the lots. And I think it is significant that an R110 zone doesn't mean that it's a 10,000 square foot lot. You can have a 1 acre lot in R110 zone. And I think, you know, they should have the right to build a building that's commensurate to their lot size. So.
Thank you. Excellent comments.
And is your client looking to build new properties in North Ogden to do this, or retrofit existing properties?
So we worked on several projects in North Ogden. The one that this applied to, because we'd intended to design it, and then the ordinance actually changed, and we were wanting to make sure that we were compliant with the ordinance, was an infill subdivision. So it was 4 lots, but the way that it was in the past, it really was whoever got there first got to get their way, and whoever came last was kind of out of luck. So,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, I do have one online.
Okay. Go ahead. Huh?
I'd like to read that email.
Oh, we got an online Zoom. Yeah.
Yeah, so we've got.
Yeah, this is the voice online. Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
My name is Jenny Taylor. I live at 123 West, 3100 North in the city of North Ogden. I appreciate what's been said. I think what stood out to me the most at the beginning of the staff's recommendation and looking at the zoning is there is not a one size fits all approach to this. And so I think, with all due respect, for someone to say there's no possible reason for anyone to need a building over 20 feet, I think a lot of us in the room or online could think of several reasons why someone might want a building over 20 feet. And there can be appropriate ways to do that, to respect the private property right and also the rights of the neighbors. I happen to own a lot that is very irregular in shape. In fact, it's almost an acre, but it's not a rectangle, it's not a square. It's not a corner lot, it's not a cul-de-sac, and it's not a through street. It has 8 separate sides. I could build on that almost acre. In my zoning, I could build 3 separate homes that each could be with the appropriate setbacks 35 feet high. My neighbors may not like if I put a home in a field, but I have the right as a property owner to put those homes to those heights. The positioning in my lot that is shaped like an L could accommodate a home and an outbuilding that would not require any obstruction either of the land or the view greater than what it would be if I were to decide to subdivide and build 2 completely separate homes. So I feel like I would like for the commission to at least consider the fact that if we're not talking about starting from scratch with a brand new development full of perfectly square and rectangular lots drawn on a grid, you're going to have some of these infill properties like mine where they're older, they're landlocked by previous developments that were approved under previous ordinances by previous administrations, which kind of tie the hands of the property owner. And yet still there should be, I would think, still some of that same private property ownership right to be able to say, if I'd be allowed to build 2 legal homes to heights and I think that it feels a little bit brash to say, but I could build one of those as an accessory unit that I would use it as a home gym, and or someone, like was mentioned, could park an RV or a boat or something, to where I just feel like it's a pretty broad brush to say no one would ever want anything higher than 20 feet. I think that's what got into the trouble of this ordinance, was before it was thought that no one would ever want anything bigger than 1,000 square feet in size. And I would ask for consideration of that. And I don't know if that's something that a visit to the property and looking at the layout of the land and how things are configured. There are older landlocked properties in our city that don't check all the boxes of a lot of new developments. And yet they're going to be developed, particularly as we continue to face a housing shortage, or we've got families that, you know, we don't have a city rec center. So a lot of us are choosing to put in our own rec rooms or sports courts in our backyards and things. And I appreciate that the city has certain standards and certain requirements, but I think to some degree, some of
Must have lost her.
is up for sale in order to
No, there.
acquire some land and try to, anyway, I just feel like this is, it's something that could be worth considering for different parcels in the city that have not so standard measurements and configurations. That's all.
Hey, thank you.
Well said, thanks.
Any other comments?
There's one comment that was emailed in. This is from Ryan Newmeyer, property owner in North Ogden. Good afternoon. I'm a resident of North Ogden, live up in the Cove. I've been wanting to build a small shop. Speaking to North Ogden officials, I found my property line offset would be greater than 15 feet or greater. It would be 15 feet. Than someone just down a couple of blocks south of me, which is 10 feet. I would ask that you would consider making things more consistent throughout different zones, so I could have my property line offset 10 feet as well. Also reconsidering and making things more consistent as far as what dictates size. According to the code, he's an HP2, I can have 25% of my footing footprint, whereas someone a few blocks south can go larger, even though I have a larger piece of land at half acre. Thank you for your time and considering my suggestions. Best regards, Ryan Newmeyer. The code in HP2 is 15-foot high maximum accessory buildings, and they're 15 feet from the property line. There's no stepping. So in a similar R110, you can be 8 feet to the property line and 15 feet tall. So that's the inconsistency that they're flagging there.
This proposal in front of us would not do anything with the HP2 zone, nor would it do anything with the RE zones that have the 1,500 foot footprint.
And the RE zones begin at 1,500, or that's like the beginning of the stepping, and then it's from 1 to 5 acres, it steps up in size up to a maximum of 3,000 square feet. So if you have 5+ acres in an RE20 zone, you can have a 3,000 square foot structure.
So I think what we're talking about in general should be something that's applicable to all the zones and should be, you know, it's gonna apply to them all. Like, especially if we're saying, hey, we don't need a number, or we're concerned about setbacks, heights, and property size. We're not concerned about the zone, you know, that something really falls in. Granted, being RE, the RE zones may be a little bit different. Like, I would be more apt to say, well, an RE zone should be allowed maybe a faster progression of size to be bigger than, than saying, oh, hey, I have 2.5 acres, but I can only have a 1,600 square foot building, you know, it's like.
That makes sense.
So.
That does make sense.
But.
Except are we okay with the fact that if you had 2.5 acres, it could be possible that somebody could build a 25,000 square foot building with those,
well, yeah, that's
maximum.
That's where it is. It's saying, you know, hey, what is that maximum? Saying 5,000 square feet is a maximum, you know?
I stand by the coolest, and they've added to the community, have been. Has anybody had a chance to play basketball in the Peterson's?
But even using that as an example, and you say, okay, 100 by 50 is a 5,000 square foot building. And that's
okay.
That's NBA basketball.
Okay. I think the one thing with that is you end up, you know, by doing it, you would then end up limiting, you know, well, if you have a lot of property, then you can't do the same things as somebody who has a little bit of property. That's a tough thing.
I just feel like, I mean, I feel like I don't know, but I feel like the other provisions of the ordinance govern this enough that we don't have to quantify, the building size. But I'm not gonna die on that hill.
You got me coming your direction on that.
But, you know, you take a Venn diagram, for example, right?
Yeah.
And you got those circles. Can everyone know what I'm talking about, right? And we've got all these ordinances. Each is a circle, and where they overlap is what we can do. And we've already got the circles that make such a small allowable circumstance that I just don't know if we need to say and put one more provision on it. And I'm not just talking about what's in front of us now, but also the 1,500 square feet on the RE20, you know. I think we might have to look at that. This is coming from someone who every time he goes to the pharmacy down here, you know, by the freeway, the pharmacist tech chews me out about her neighbor's accessory building. They've been in here and talked about it because it's offensive. But it's not the size that's offensive. It's the location, it's the building materials, it's all these other things that we're regulating already.
Setbacks.
You don't think it's the height?
I do think it's the height in relation to the property
Distance from
line.
the property line.
But I don't think, and I'm gonna have to disagree with you, I don't think that 25 feet necessarily is a bad standard. We allow homes to be 35. So just because it's an accessory building, I don't think it needs to be limited in height, because I do think it can have that site triangle to go up to 25 feet and create a feeling of openness, especially on a bigger lot. You know, when I got on the planning commission, I was firmly, passionately, vehemently against flag lots. And then my eyes have been opened that in the right situation on a big lot in an area where there's a lot of space, a flag lot is an asset to the area and not a detriment, because I'm thinking of flag lots in a tight little box, right? And so I just think that we a lot of times visualize, oh, this is how it would look in my neighborhood, or this is how it would look in the neighborhood that, you know, where an application has come through. And it doesn't, I love the comment about one size doesn't fit all.
I think another argument for the going back to the size thing in the space is we don't allow property owners who have more property the same rights as people who have small property. Then we're essentially encouraging the breaking up of properties. And one of the things that people want are green space.
Yep.
And so if they can't do it, they can't build a bigger shop or whatever, then they're probably going to sell it and have a bunch of small properties. And we're defeating the purpose of something that we're trying to encourage, that we say.
So if we're talking about kind of applying this across the zones and saying we want size to be determined more based on how much property you have, then
Yeah.
you know, it sounds like we're all probably not 100% in agreement, but we're all kind of dancing down that line of saying, hey, the 1-to-1 setback ratio, 25 feet tall at 18 feet works. Then the actual footprint of the building that's based off of the ground you have. And maybe what we do in there, you know, to Commissioner's Lunt's comment is saying, well, if I got 20 acres, I'm going to build a 50,000 square foot airport hangar. You know? maybe
Might be a bit much.
what's the line that we say, okay, that's going to be so rare. Do we say, hey, at 3,000 square feet, it requires a come before the planning commission?
There you go.
A site plan?
Yeah.
Because that's going to be so rare that it's like, okay, now we do have a limit, and saying beyond that requires approval, and these are the parameters.
But yeah,
How big is your property? How close to the property line are you? And what's its intended use? And then we have something to govern. Yes, we'll allow you to go bigger, or no, because you want to put an airport hangar in there and you're not allowed to fly a helicopter there, so we're not letting you do it. You know, we have something, because even just because they're coming before site plan, we have to have standards that we're going to be judging against. And that really would be the same thing as in relation. And maybe we feel like, hey, if you're over that, we're going to require more separation. We're going to require what is the use, because if you're trying to build a recreational dance hall that you're going to use, then, you know, or whatever. I mean, that would be some caveat to catch the rarity and on the other end of the spectrum that somebody.
although are we boxing the future planning commission into now saying, oh, I don't like that? You know what I mean? Then I need to have quantifiable measurements.
I'm just looking at saying we have something that's just not somebody comes in one day out of the blue and says, I'm going to build a 10,000 square foot building out of bright blue metal, and I'm going to, you know, use it for my own use shop in there, and I have the property to do it, so I'm doing it. And then the noise, the things they're doing annoys everybody. And we're like, why did we let that happen? Somewhere we have a caveat that says, okay, here's where there's just one more check. But we're not now trying to figure out this whole standard that applies to everything from a tough shed to a airport hangar.
Yeah.
You know,
I think that also.
Since we're still in public meeting, right?
yes,
Make a comment.
yes.
This is
I've been trying to look at building an accessory building unit out in the county. Their situation is 50% of the total square footage of the home, maximum 1,500 square feet. I'm wondering why those ordinances were put into place. We investigated the reason they've done that, similar to what we have faced. I'm sure they've been up against something. And, you know, to set this out at 3,000 square feet, to come before the commission, I'm just wondering why the county, because this piece of property I've got is like 2.6 acres. And they don't care. It's 50% of the total square footage of the home, maximum 1,500 square feet. I'm just wondering, are we missing something? Why?
Well, I asked that, you know, when we created this, I asked the question, why, to staff, and the answer I got back was, why would you need anything bigger? That was the reason. So that's where I look at and say, well, I can think of a lot of things that maybe would be bigger than 1,200 square feet.
Yeah, my wife
A lot of
wants
uses.
this barndominium to be bigger than 1,500.
Yeah, and so, you know, that to me, that's not an answer when you say, well, why would you need it? It's the same reason as saying, why does anybody need more than a kitchen and bedroom and bathroom
I'm
in
just
their
wondering
house?
what type of situations they ran into that caused them to put that limit there. Are we missing something?
Yeah, you wonder if that's the same thing that caused us to do what we did. And now we're coming back saying, oh, well, maybe we were a little bit too restrictive when we did it. You know, good comment, Mayor, and good point. That's
Probably the easiest
kind
to
of
see
it
when
is
it was
what is
implemented. If
the,
it's an old historic standard, then
They just modified it.
just barely.
3 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is why we keep coming back to this issue over and over the years that I've been here, you know, is because it isn't a one size fits all. And there's always, you know, there's always the larger property that could accommodate more. But the problem is if you write the ordinance that accommodates that, then you get the 25-foot, suddenly you have the 25-foot blue metal monstrosity and all the neighbors around them are, you know, going crazy, which is how we've gotten to where we are, you know, so. I don't know, it's a fine balance because we have to make an ordinance that fits the whole city, you know, not somebody who has a
Yeah.
2.5 acre property. That's not the issue. Generally, that's not where the problem's gonna be. It's gonna be in these other R1 residential zones that
I
are
still,
really impacting the neighbors.
but I go by, let's regulate the things that are impacting the neighbors, and I don't think it's size. And although I think it's loosely tied to height, I think it's height in proximity to the property line.
I would agree with that.
So I fall back on let's regulate the things that we find distasteful, and we're never gonna please everyone. I agreed with Brandon
Mhm.
when he said, hey, we're probably doing something right. Let arrows in the packet or something, because 50% of the town thinks the regulation's too strict and 50% of the town thinks it's too loose.
Which is why we
Which
keep
is
going
right,
back and forth.
exactly like the mask mandate, right? Like half the people I know love it
Yeah.
and half think it needs to be more, right? Like,
Right.
so, the role of government's probably struck a pretty okay balance. But if there's some little things we can tweak to allow some of these irregular lots to, and I can visualize them, as that comment came in over Zoom, I started thinking about Canal Road and along that corridor there, there's some irregular lots and some deep, weird shapes, and having a big accessory building in the back fits, it's great, it's what we want to some extent, makes good use of the land, I think. I mean, we talk a lot about, I mean, what are their alternatives? Just buy a riding lawnmower and have a whole bunch of grass to water, or not water this year? I'm in favor of what's been proposed, and as soon as the public hearing's closed, I think I'm gonna move that we adopt this and cut out the 1250 and then address the other zones, I believe.
well, you bring up a good point. Close the public hearing. We've heard from all public in attendance tonight, I believe, so entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I make a motion to close.
I'll second it.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, public hearing is now closed. We'll continue with our discussion and possible motion for recommendation.
So if I could just interject one comment, there have been a couple of proposed ideas or considerations about the 1,250 square feet. Commissioner Mason mentioned this idea of, over a certain square footage, bring it to the planning commission.
Your idea.
Versus,
Oh,
sorry.
I'll take credit for that.
Well,
It's a great
if
idea.
it's negative, leave it on.
But another alternative is just, I'm not suggesting this, I'm just saying it's an alternative, is raise it to a level that you think is going to cover 95% of buildings. Because if someone, the point being that I would guess that the percentage of properties in the R1 zone that are, say, above 3/4 acres are like 1% or less, right? I would guess that 99% are probably 15,000 square feet or less. Maybe it's 20, but so my point is the number of people that could even build a building that big. Let's say that average rear yard, I'm just guessing based on reviewing building permits and other applications for a long time. Let's say the average rear yard is 4,000 square feet, maybe 5,000 square feet. That might be generous, especially for the R18 zones. Then the maximum building you could build on that at 25% for a 4,000 square foot lot would be 1,000 square foot, and for a 5,000, did I get that right? Yeah, and then 1,000 would be 1,250 at 25%. So 90, probably 7 or 8%, or it's going to be limited to somewhere around that 1,000 to 1,250. So if and there, so that 25% rule is going to be the limiting factor for 97, 98% of the properties. You could, if you limited it to say 2,000 square feet, that would be pretty generous for the other properties. That'd be a quicker solution. I recognize it's not exact, and I'm not saying it's the right one. I'm just saying it's another alternative to just raise it to something that's so high that it's pretty generous, but gonna prevent the airplane hangar, building, from being automatically approved. So
Do you
one
think
option.
if we took that box where you have the 1,250 square feet, we put in there, structures above 1,500 square feet require special approval from the planning commission or planning commission review, would we be boxing ourselves in to a bad process?
No, I was gonna.
We'd probably see less.
Yes.
You have to.
And then unless you're gonna give yourself a way to deny a building, then there's no reason to make it come to you.
Gotcha.
Because if
I had the same thought.
Because there's gonna be nothing you can do to impose to say, oh, you can't build an airplane hangar. Unless we build that into the statute as well.
Yes.
So I think another way of saying what John's pointing out is that you have to have an objective standard. So even if you change the approval authority to the planning commission, you would have to have some standards to determine whether it can be approved.
Otherwise, we're just, oh, is this a nice person? Are we gonna approve this? Yeah, I got that.
So.
Well, so if that's being the case, then what is it? Is it something that's saying, okay, hey, if you want to exceed, if 2,000 is that number, if you want to exceed 2,000, then we're going to require a 2-to-1 ratio away from the property line. And we're going to, some of those things start to come into place that, because exactly like what John said, is we got to have standards in there that somebody needs to meet. It needs to come before us, but like I said, we got to have a way to say, well, no, you don't meet this. Or, as much as we always want to just say, well, if we like it, we'll approve it. If we don't, we won't. But unfortunately, that's how the city council operates, not the planning commission. They have the ability because they're legislative, we're not.
Yeah.
So that came out probably wrong. Legislative decisions can be off how you feel.
So
not
So then I
administrative.
go back to the comment that we could just remove that 1,250 square feet altogether and feel good that it's limited by the fact that it has to be, it can't be in front of the house. It's got to be.
But do we have a
certain part of
size
the property.
limit? Like Commissioner Hunt said, if somebody could build a 10,000 square foot building, do we
That
care?
has those building materials, I'd almost like to see it. Really, I feel like it's self-governed. I'm not gonna die on that hill. But
When we first did this, I felt like building materials would self-govern anything because of expense, but it's such a rare thing and again, if it's so rare, do you just put some number and say, well, just to make sure there's a cap, no buildings larger than X.
Well, then let's take, if you guys want the X in there, let's take it up from 1,250 because somebody's gonna come in with a 1,500.
Oh, I agree.
And-
I'm just thinking if some max, if we're applying, I'm thinking this is applying to all zones.
I am too.
And so
I am
you
too.
say, hey, some max, what is that? Is it 2,000, 3,000, 4,000? Say, hey, look, you can't build an accessory building larger than 3,000 square feet, 4,000 square feet. What are your solutions? Connect it to the house. Make it part of the structure, make it part of the dwelling, and then that square footage requirement goes away. So if you want something bigger than that, it needs to be connected to the dwelling. So there's a solution to be able to build something bigger. And then the city still has something that, some kind of cap. I don't see something that large, but
yeah,
who knows?
So on that topic, as you consider Commissioner Thomas's question, the current, the ordinance as currently designed only applies to the R1 zones, does not apply to HP1, does not apply to RE20 zones. So if that affects your cap, then just be aware of that.
The only reason I'm thinking that is because the minute we change this one, then somebody's in an HP zone say, well, why in an R110 zone can they do this and I can't?
We're doing our best saying.
Well, then why don't we, then I would like to propose that we pass this on with a positive, how am I trying to say this? I'd like to that we pass a positive recommendation of this ordinance on to the city council. That we change the 1,250 square feet in 4A, that we adopt, that we eliminate the text as stated in 4A, but we change that 1,250 square feet to 1,500 square feet, which will bring it in line with the RE zones.
Second.
Thank you.
So then when somebody comes in with a larger lot and wants something bigger, what do we?
Restart.
We go to do this all over again.
The only reason I bring this up is I know there's 3
Yeah.
people in the city right now that would like to build something bigger than 1,500 square feet that are all on over an acre of ground. And they all, well, one, their solution was to rezone out of an R1 zone
So we have
to be able to gain that, but
like, I actually completely agree with you. We have a motion in a second. Would you like to amend my motion?
no, I'm just,
I
this
want
is a
you to amend my
discussion.
motion.
Amendment.
As far as the size, and probably in my opinion, if we're going it by zone, I would agree with you on size, but again, I think most of the city is zoned R110. I know I have a development that has 250 lots in R110, and I would say 50% of them are closer to 15,000 square feet lots. Now, we don't have an R15 zone, but I'm just saying, as a size governance, to say, oh, but at 15,000 square feet, I wouldn't say you'd want a building bigger than 1,500 square feet there either.
No.
It really comes into play on those oddities that are
Yep.
acre plus lots.
Yep.
And maybe that's what we do is we put a caveat in there. If you're in an R1 zone and you have more than an acre, that's when you come in or that's when we have some kind of a different factor.
But we don't have that objective review for it. So we can't put that in without an objective.
Or do we just say, if you're in R1 zone and you're larger than an acre, we'll allow you up to 2,000 feet. That's the max. I don't know how often this is really gonna happen,
Right.
but since we created this ordinance, it's been before us 3 times to change it.
Yeah.
So
It'll be 3 more times.
if we have a limit in there and it says it has to come to the planning commission, we're gonna see it in the planning commission more for people asking for an exception than we have, so it's like, well, let's.
No, I'm all about drafting a thoughtful, and really, this is a thoughtful recommendation because the city council has final say on this. Just a reminder.
I mean, I feel like the setback requirements are gonna govern anything that's probably smaller than 15,000.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree on that.
Although, yeah, I agree. I'm not gonna say my elbow.
Once you get bigger than that, then that's where, you might want to say, hey, do we really want a 3,000 square foot building on a 1 acre lot? In an R110 zone. And to me, I'm saying, well, what if it was 5 1 acre lots altogether? Probably doesn't matter. If it's an oddity that some guy's got 2 lots at the end of a cul-de-sac and he's got then it may not fit in. So we have a motion and a second. Oh,
And no quorum.
I'll wait to call for a vote.
Okay, do we,
I-
commissioners?
After
I'm
we take
willing
this
to
vote, we're gonna take a
amend my
little
motion
recess.
if you guys have better wording for it. Mine was pretty simple. It's as is written by staff, with the exception that we changed 1,200 square feet to 1,500 square feet. Just to give us at least a stick, and I guess we can, when somebody comes in that wants bigger than 1,500 and has a compelling reason, I guess we can take a look at the ordinance then, or the future planning commission can. I mean,
Well,
But that's why I say, there's
added-
already 3 people in line though.
oh, really?
And
Yeah.
so I'm like,
you
well,
just
let's try
added
and,
something, that, like maybe one addition to it that said if it's over an acre, it could go up to 2,000 or something.
yeah.
Should we add that now or recommend that we add?
I mean,
it now?
You gotta remember, even in RE 20 zone, subdivision of half acre lots, they're limited to 1,500 feet.
Right.
So
That's why I grabbed 1,500 feet.
do we say, based on, and somebody in there says, oh, I'm on a 1 acre lot, I want to go a little bit bigger. I don't know what the I can't remember the escalation scale, but I would like some tool in there that they don't have to come back to us because, hey, we qualify. We have a acre lot. Maybe it's if you're over 30,000 square feet, which would be, and say if you're over 30,000 square feet in your lot, then, the limit is 2,000.
How big of garages do these people want?
Well, so I know of, so both of the ones I know over in the Cove, one wants a garage, I think that's probably, I don't know, the footprint, if it's 2,000 square feet footprint. The other one wants to build an indoor sport court. That's probably
Like Peterson's.
2,500 square feet, But in the instance, the one owns 3 lots and the other one they both own 3 lots. So they own over an acre of ground. And I don't think the 2,000 fits in either one of
So
them.
would you
either.
like to see a table in for based on acreage and square foot limitations to the building?
Well, but the mayor brings up a good point. What draws the lines to make a limit? Just again, going
It's
back.
true,
to
that
saying,
would
It's
be
pretty
pulling that out.
arbitrary, right?
Yeah.
all of a sudden
Yeah.
you see these giant accessory buildings pop up and then we're gonna sit back before us and say, well, hey, look, you guys got 2 lakhs again, because now. But. I'm of the opinion. I don't know, if you want it bigger than 2,000 square feet, attach it to the house. And that is probably rare enough that it's to go bigger than that maybe that's the line. And even the people I'm thinking about saying, well, they could probably shrink their garage or their sport court down to fit within that size of a building. And if they do want it bigger, then make it part of their dwelling.
So are you proposing that instead of 1,500, it maybe be 2,000?
I don't know what I'm proposing.
Again, we're just.
No, I guess,
I'm just trying to
I'm just
get us
saying,
to
I
a
guess
point
I'm
here
saying,
somewhere.
if you're over a certain amount of square footage, then you could go up to 2,000 feet.
And that could be just as easy as adding one more
Yeah.
little thing in there.
So if you're in R1 zone and you have, 30,000 square feet, you can go up to 2,000 square feet. Or if it's an acre, I don't care if we draw the line at an acre.
See, that'd work. If they don't go above that, we're gonna cut it anyway.
Okay, I would like to amend my motion. That box 4A say that the size of this accessory dwelling unit be limited to 1,500 square feet for lots under 1 acre. For lots over an acre, the limit be 2,500 square feet.
2,000.
Second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second.
Let the record show I pulled 2,500.
Same way the original numbers were pulled.
Yeah.
And you're just grateful the city council has to make the final decision.
Okay. So Commissioner Webb, Commissioner Mason amended his motion to say above 1 acre, 2,500 square feet is allowable.
Sounds good.
We are voting. Commissioner Arner,
Yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yeah.
Commissioner Mason,
Yep.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
and I vote yes. Why does that take so long?
Because we want to
All
try
right.
to get it right.
Let's
this
take
time,
a-
We'll be doing this again.
Does anybody need a recess besides me? 5-minute recess.
So we're just gonna leave Zoom on, 'cause it's too hard to turn it off. and on.
Oh, no, I.
It's raining pretty good.
Oh, really? Oh, no.
Sun doesn't have any other hours, right?
It's long enough.
Yeah, Corey. And I kind of heard that, I heard it like, and I know.
How are you? Good.
I was just asking why. The county is bigger than that, in the county. 1,500, 50% of the primary dwelling.
And they just amended that within the last couple of years.
Last 3 years.
Last 3 years. Do you know what it was before that?
John probably does.
Well, they can do that because there's a provision in state code that says if it's over 5 acres, then they have no say on it if it's an agricultural building. So they can do the.
2.6 acres, and they do have a provision height-wise, if it looks like a barn.
So yeah, they're not affecting the agricultural businesses, because if it's agricultural building, then they can't make the rules.
Don't worry, if this bill goes so that the Democrats want to go through, all that be done away with anyway, because any dairy farm that has a cow be fined $6,500 per cow for having them. Because they give off gas.
All become vegetarians. Yeah, so,
But you're not already.
People are voting for this? Imagine what your beef will cost to go to Longhorn Steakhouse instead of $20 can be
There's no more public here.
There's no more public here? Yeah, I move we approve everything left on the agenda.
Second that.
There's one more what? No, I know, there's two still. Title 11 and 12 and house plan, moderate.
Oh, yeah.
But what I mean is there's no public in attendance anymore. Well, I don't know on Zoom, but
So we just have our two code consultants and we do have one member of the public still listening.
all right.
They get the bark around and sleep.
So John, as we pick this back up, we did have one question. What Brandon meant to do on his motion was include that this standard apply to the other zones with accessory buildings. Can he amend his motion and so that we don't have to have another zone text amendment for the other zones?
So it'd be a motion to revisit. And then a motion on the new motion.
But I question if we can do this because we didn't notify the public of a public hearing
Well,
for zones that they may be in.
So that's what I was gonna say is I think the staff needs to look at how it was advertised. Because if it was advertised as a public hearing to deal with accessory buildings, then that could be any code section.
Okay, so I'm going to, I'd like to put this back on our table real quick.
So a motion to reconsider that motion.
I'd like to put a motion to reconsider our previous motion on the table.
And if it's affirmative, then you would then do a new motion and.
Okay. I so moved.
We have a motion to readdress the motion on zone text amendment 2021-6. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to revisit the motion on item number 9. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, we're readdressing the motion, which was to pass a positive recommendation on the city council with changing the limitation of size to 2,500 square feet as a maximum. If you're over an acre lot and 1,500 square feet, otherwise.
And I like to keep the text as is in my original motion and add on. And if legally applicable, I would like this motion to apply to all zones. And would like a review from staff if that could be applied to all zones.
So
Do I have another second?
This is scheduled for city council on next Tuesday.
Yeah, I'll plan on going to attend, try to defend what our discussion was tonight.
Are you wanting language addressing the other zones?
Okay, good clarification. So the other zones are written more complicated. Now that seems like a lot of work for you. So I would recommend that we just take the maximum size provision and apply that same little table where we have maximum square footage of, I believe it was 1,500 square feet for lots under an acre, and for lots an acre and above, the maximum square feet be 2,500.
But don't we still want the 1-to-1 ratio on setbacks? Because
yeah, but
the HP zone has a 10-foot set or 15-foot setback.
If I hear you correctly, you're saying that the same table should be created for all zones. And if by some reason the noticing doesn't work out that would allow for technical reasons, then staff will bring back some future language for those other things.
My intention, that is exactly it. My intention is not to hold up this specific application. I felt like someone in good faith put this in and we beat it to death and it needs to move forward. I think that the principles that we addressed in here, including all the other things that Brandon drew up with the site triangles and all that, I think they should apply to all zones. I don't think that's fair to do to staff to just say, oh, hey, make all that legalese. So therefore my motion was limited to just the square foot.
So I looked at our legal notice. It specifically references 1174. So we'll have to bring it back.
Oh, man.
Okay, I'd like to table this item. Drop this item.
Withdraw your.
And so you'd withdraw your motion.
Yeah, I withdraw my motion.
All right,
And dies.
we will move on to
Good try though.
what item do we want to do next?
Do we need to vote on if it
So
can
we
die?
do, No,
Okay.
we do still have our consultants on the line for the Title 11 stuff.
Good
and
God.
12.
Okay, so item number 7, zone text amendment 2019-06, public hearing, consideration and recommendation on a legislative amendment to reorganize North Ogden Code Title 11 and Title 12. Presenter is Scott Hess. Scott?
Thank you. So planning commission has had an opportunity to see the Title 11 and 12 reorganization in 2 different sections. One was section 1, section 2, then section 3, section 4. This eliminates current Title 11 and Title 12, makes them a single title, subdivision and zoning regulations together. And substantively really is a reorganization. It's not, there are not a huge number of substantial changes that are happening in here. Since that final review of all 4 sections, staff has prepared a website, a city website on this, and has promoted on Facebook page. We have not received a lot of public comment. I think that was to be expected. It's pretty meaty to go through and understand what the changes are. If there's any questions, we do have our consultants on board. One thing that I would ask in the motion is that planning commission grants staff the ability to update the reorganized Title 11 and 12, specifically with those ordinances like the one that you're considering tonight that have been updated in the interim between the consultant creating the reorganized code and today's code. So we have approximately 12 to 18 months worth of code reorganization work that happened kind of side by side with a handful of different codes that have been changed, like commercial signage standards now, fencing as it relates to hedge, the most important question that I've ever answered in my planning career. And now this one as well. So we are diligently going backwards through those code amendments to make sure they're reflected in Title 11, 12, so we don't unwind the work that we've done as a planning commission. But in the presentation that you have in front of you tonight, not all of those are reflected. So staff would just like some latitude in making sure that those are all correct prior to the city council seeing this for a final recommendation, essentially. That's not to say we're going to change a bunch of standards and just like go willy-nilly. It's really to make sure that we are in compliance with those codes that have been changed up to this point.
Okay.
That's all I want to present unless you guys want 30 or 40 minutes more of talking about it.
Let's go ahead and
verbatim?
open. Let's go ahead and open the public hearing. Zone text amendment 2019-6. A public hearing. If you're here, please address us. Step up to the mic and state your name and address. If you're on Zoom, raise your hand or type in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. The public hearing is now open. Anything from Zoom?
Nope.
I have no comment. Move we close the public hearing.
A second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, any discussion on this?
Do you need anything from the consultants, from John or Jen?
No, they're here to help represent any questions you might have, changes process-wise, things that I can't answer having not been here through that whole process. And really as a courtesy to us, their contract has closed with the city.
John and Jen aren't getting paid by the hour?
Oh,
wow.
If they are,
Poor
we're gonna
guys.
have to address it. We'll address that.
It's the only way I felt better about this.
Would you entertain a motion?
I will.
So I make a motion that we find that the code reorganization is basically ready to make a recommendation, a positive recommendation to the city council. And that if there are any minor corrections, that we allow the staff the authority to correct those in the final version to be presented to the city council.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Does that cover it for you, Mr. Hess?
Yeah.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancarrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Arner,
Yes.
and I vote yes. That's a miracle. All right. Item number 10, public hearing and consideration and recommendation for legislative amendment to update North Ogden City moderate income housing plan, a component of the general plan. Presenter Scott Hess.
Okay, this is another one that we have talked about at length. The major changes that we've made in this staff report are in relation to Senate Bill 34 menu items that are our marching orders of the things that we will consider in our general plan to address moderate income housing in our city. The numbers in this plan still need to be updated, but those are they're substantive because they do represent the percentages of income ratios that are in the city. But as far as what the language within the moderate income housing plan says, that really won't change from this point going forward between now and the council, and we need to get this adopted by December 1. So staff's recommendation again is, these are items that we will address, and there will be some amendments in this between now and when the council ultimately looks at it and adopts it, but those are in relation to the tables that the Department of Workforce Services provides to the city for inclusion in our modern income housing plan. And that's all.
Okay. Let's go ahead and open the public hearing for the update to North Ogden City's moderate income housing plan. This time, if you'd like to address us on this, please step up to the mic or raise your hand on Zoom. Public hearing is now open.
Nobody.
We have no
Make a
comment.
motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, discussion. Any other questions? Entertain a motion of recommendation.
I move that we recommend a positive recommendation under the city council for the moderate income housing.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Start with Commissioner Webb,
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancarrow,
Yes.
Commissioner Arner,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker.
Yes.
And I vote yes. All right, Kai, can you do it in 5 minutes? Item number 11, zone text amendment 2018, see, 3 years, -10, discussion on streetscape standards. Presenter is Kai Johnson. We have tabled this 3 times before because it's gotten to this late in the night, so go ahead, Kai.
All right, so I guess the big question that, before we move forward with this is, staff has put together a cross-section that kind of meets the bare minimum for all the street users. That was kind of what we came to in our last discussion with the city council. So I guess the big question is do we change the land use patterns around the street, or we recognize that the cloth is in many ways already cut for North Ogden in that regard? So John, if we could go to the first slide. So this is, I kind of highlighted the areas of Mountain Road that have not been completed. There's approximately 2 miles of Mountain Road that's not developed yet. Scroll down to the transportation map and the trails map, please. So the transportation map shows the road running in front of Long Bench, and the trails map shows the trail running along the top of Long Bench. If you can see that there. Scroll down just a little further to the next slide. So this is the section above Lakeview Drive right along Long Bench. There is actually a proposal, or there's a development agreement for that particular subdivision. If you will scroll down to that Northview Estates preliminary plat. So this will be Mountain Road right along Long Bench. They're proposing, looks like a tree-lined street right along Long Bench. So that section of road is kind of already laid out. I'll scroll down a little bit further. This is kind of the two cross sections that meet the bare minimum. One with an LID median, one without an LID median. This meets the bare minimum for all users of the street. And one thing I don't like about this design is it's kind of designed so that the bike lanes can be eliminated and there will be 2 travel lanes, which really will increase the speed as well as the traffic volume along that road. And I think it's disingenuous to the cyclist community to provide those facilities and then just take them away at a future date. So that's kind of where we're at. So
why do you think, what's the negative effect to the cyclist community? Because it still has a bike lane in there.
Right, but the
Not a
street,
2-lane?
right, the street is designed so that those bike lanes would be eliminated once the traffic demand would require that. So it would be a.
Oh, I see. It'd be there and then the.
Meaning it's wide enough and someone in the future could say, hey, we've got 40 feet of asphalt, we should put in 4 lanes instead of 2 lanes with bikes.
And that's the top design. That's the reason I don't like that.
But once we get traffic heavy enough that we need that,
Yeah,
are those the kind of roads that we say, hey, we don't want
Bike
bikes on these roads?
We'll put a bike lane out somewhere else, or we can squeeze 10 feet in.
You never keep them off of it anyway.
No, but what I'm thinking is, okay, so it would service the bike community now, and then one day bikes would get squoze out for another car lane.
Main arterial,
Right.
2700.
But at that time, property would be then somewhere else, some parallel road would have to have a bike lane in it. And maybe one bike lane just goes one direction and then another goes another direction. I don't know.
I
Maybe
agree,
there's too many stop
that's
signs.
the problem. The bicycles are going to go where they're going to go. I mean, look at you on North Ogden Divide, look at you on Fruitland Drive and Mountain Road. There's no shoulder whatsoever, but they can still bicycle there. Doesn't matter to me if you take the bicycle lane away, there's still one bicycle.
So you think
Yeah, but it's not bad if you got 2 lanes
I agree with
of
that
traffic
too.
going their direction, then there's at least room for people to go around.
Correct.
Well, folks, I've said in here a bunch, and I see the future maybe differently than other people, but I see with the rise in e-bikes and e-scooters and all these electric ways of conveyance, that we're gonna wanna have some dedicated space for this. You know, there's gonna be 12-year-olds go into their friend's house, and it used to be you just had to hang out with the guys in your neighborhood, or girls, although no girls would hang out with me when I was 12, certainly. But you know, I see that the junior high kids in the future are gonna be able to just get over to their friend's house 5 miles away in 15 minutes on an something or other, you know. So, and I'd love to see a city that has seen that and given them a way to do that.
It will be a huge advantage to our city to have those things.
Yeah. No, so that's easy to say and harder to do. So I don't know what, I don't know exactly what design gets us there, but I think on a street like this, we really need to think about this.
Well, I think we do our part for the time now, is saying, hey, let's accommodate it and make this work. I mean, if we're truly at that point where traffic is so congested that we need additional lanes, you know.
Be a decision for a future date.
That's, I mean, not saying that's a long time away, so who cares, but also there should be a lot of other built out streets that.
Right, and street widening happens. I mean, look at Washington Boulevard. It takes some eminent domain, it takes some taking of homes and buying of homes. I remember when I was a kid, 12th Street got widened from the canyon down. I don't know if anyone remembers that. It happens.
So what are you looking for, Kai? Just,
I guess.
yes, we like this.
Just
No,
like-
go back to the drawing board. We want to see it 12 more times. What's,
I mean, I think if you guys are behind this, recognizing that this this does meet the minimum for all the street users. I think, you know, if you would pass this along as a recommendation to the city council, and then they can kind of decide if using LID, working with the developers to put those medians in, I think is an issue. Then there's kind of the issue of street trees. If the trees and park strips guide covers trees good enough, then we just stick with that, or do we want to recommend a specific species or?
I don't know, sure.
I think they have trees they can pick from, not be told, here's a tree you'll plant, they have, I mean.
Didn't we do that already?
Yeah, and then like suddenly they were not, sorry.
The city already has a list of trees that they can use in park strips and that, they already have
Yeah.
those trees.
Because I think a few years ago, we went through this.
We
and
did.
Made a decision on what trees we
Right.
wanted to do and what we would accept in park strips.
But that was on Washington Boulevard.
Is that all that?
It
On
was.
Washington Boulevard.
And then that tree wasn't conducive to snow melt, so
No.
it got pulled. So I think, yes, this design is good, and I would like to see on some of these arterial roads, the incorporation, you know, we're talking about the most water restrictive year we've ever had. So we're saying, yeah, let's plant trees and things.
I know, but should design, I mean, I just feel like it's at the, who built first? It's like, so South Ogden gets this great parkway with a middle median, with a grassy median and trees, because they built theirs in the 90s. And because we're building it now, we're gonna get this like rock, no good, skin your knee when you fall down.
So that's
Snake
what they got
infested
on their,
hellhole.
that's what they got on their extension. though. If you remember when we drive that, the part that was built
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
eighties is nice and beautiful. The part that was built in the 2000 teens is
That's
all
true.
asphalt and concrete. They took away the landscaping and just made it a wide road. So,
And where did you feel better? What made
oh,
you happier?
I'm a proponent of, let's put a landscape median in. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
The reality of it is I don't think we'll maintain it, so.
Well, that landscape
Well, I
median is
think-
good for them, but for the rest of North Ogden, why are they paying for something they'll see or use?
Well, I disagree. I think this community will use it. I think it'll be one of the crown jewels of the city. that
I'll
will
never
be-
go up there.
I disagree with
I
you.
got no
I
reason
would
to.
never go up there.
You would never go up there.
I wouldn't.
But when you drive
Okay.
the road, it's a nice road.
But yeah,
You
so
can do that about the landscape medium.
you know, my in-laws are from Nevada were in town today, and so I drove them over into the valley and through Huntsville and stuff because it was a nice drive and I needed to get them out of the house. But I hope they're not watching. But I disagree. I mean, you guys can disagree with me and that's fine. But I think it will be an asset to the community and I think it will be a draw. I think you'll find reasons to go up there, even though you live south of it, you know.
I think the place that everyone goes is towards our services. You know, and so I think, I definitely think enhancements to the community along those lines are very important. I mean, I would love to see this. I think it's gonna be a major, you know, thoroughfare getting over to the freeway. You know, 2700 was a brilliant idea here. You know, it's great.
I don't think most of North Ogden will even go up there.
Yeah,
And so why should they be using their taxpayer money to pay for something they'll never really look at or use? And yet they made this neighborhood wonderful, while their neighborhood doesn't get anything.
Duly noted, but I stand by not everything needs to be utilitarian. Some things can be done for community enhancement, and I think we have a open canvas to develop on it there, and I'd like to see us do it. So we can disagree, we'll still be friends. I promise that we know our feelings,
Yeah.
but my opinion is unchanged, that it should be an enhancement to the area.
I agree with that. And I also agree with that, you know, a place that everyone does go, everyone goes to Smithton or at least to shop. Everyone's got to get food. So there's a difference in those two locations.
Yeah, and if we're just setting a standard and saying, okay, look, our arterial roads, artery roads.
With the veins.
Yeah. We want, you know, we're willing to spend a little more money to have those roads be nicer.
For sure.
And, you know, some people drive Mountain Road, some people don't. Some people drive Fruitland Drive, some people don't. everybody drives Washington
Yep.
and some people wish they didn't.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's that, it's like, yeah. You can't say, you know, we can't segregate and say, well, this person that lives on 1700 in Washington, they get on Washington Boulevard, which is a state road, and drive out of town, so their tax dollars should be less because they don't use,
Yeah.
you know, the 3100. But at the same time, you know, we collect dollars to enhance a city. We have a swimming pool, we have amphitheater, we have parks, all these things that 75% of the residents don't use, but everybody collectively pays for it, and it makes a nicer community. And so I think it's okay to have your artery roads be a little bit higher standard and
I
say,
agree.
hey, this is what it is.
Yeah, I just want to clear that I'm not saying that because I live north of 3100 barely, by the way. This would not impact me too much. I would make the same arguments for Mountain Road and Fruitland Drive and.
Well, but this is
those
the same.
places-
This isn't just
yeah.
Mountain Road. I mean, this is Monroe. As Monroe
Right.
develops, the same standard applies all the way down to the south border of the city. So, you know, we'd love to apply this standard to Washington Boulevard, but we just widened it and didn't put a median in it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and then that's my point for making a comment is this is gonna apply to Mountain Road. It will apply to Monroe. I think they're both important to beautify, but I think it's important to recognize that there are differences. And one of the big differences is people go down to Smith's to get food. You know, and that it would have been nice to have done it on Washington Boulevard. Honestly, had we been able to do that, it would have made a big difference.
But is Washington really, it's not I mean, is it classified an arterial road? It's a highway.
Major collector.
Yeah, it's Washington.
it'd be the next level up.
Yeah.
But
So, I mean, where I agree, yeah, let's give it the most bang for our buck. I mean, Washington has been a highway for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I also don't know if putting a berm down the middle of Monroe makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
no, but I guess that would be a road with a median without a island in it, but
Yeah.
it's more, it's got bike lanes on the side. And that one, I think we talked about having little bump outs at the stop signs of landscaping
Yeah,
to kind
that's
of
right.
help enhance those areas, but not necessarily plant a median or put a median in. And I'm not saying we should be putting a median in Mountain Road. I think that makes it look great, but I think it causes a problem with development and driveways. If we're gonna do that, then we need to cluster the driveways to
Mhm.
accommodate openings. That's what they did at Skyline,
Or have the slots
know.
rear face.
but
It does seem like the priority would be people getting around and softening that as much as possible. You know, I think focusing the money, the effort, the landscaping, whatever, not just as a visual element where people are gonna walk, bike, they've got a little bit of shade. I mean, it's pretty exposed up there. I think it'd be nice to have it in the middle, but it does cause some other issues.
But where do you have that ability in the middle?
Well, maybe you don't do it in the middle. is what I-
3100.
Yeah.
What's the middle of North Ogden now?
Yeah.
It's shifting.
No, the middle of the road, sorry.
Oh, gotcha.
The middle, you know, the median of the road, you know, if we're gonna focus on bike lanes and things like that, making it pleasant for people to get out and enjoy those. You know, you may strategically do a couple of things along the, you know.
you paint the bike lane green, so it looks like we've got green
There you
vegetation.
go, green paint.
Hey, that
Fake
actually
grass.
softens the road
Yeah,
when you do that.
Perfect.
yeah.
All right, Kai, you've got all our information that probably got you
I don't know
no
what you did
further.
I think will work.
This is a bunch of random ideas. What are you gonna do? Honestly, what are you gonna do with that? That's a hot ball of garbage. Like, and I said most of it.
It's like council that gets to deal with it. So, no, the city council gets to deal with it. No,
Why do we even do this?
I guess
Like-
what I'm,
Kai's an
you
expert.
know,
in
collectively, he had A and B, right?
Yeah.
We're all kind of leaning towards B with the median in the middle with some landscaping.
Well,
Right?
not
Or we're not.
unanimously, yeah.
We think that looks the best. The feasibility of that is probably And the reality of it is probably.
We
not
rarely are
feasible.
divided. I kind of like this.
Mhm.
Well, no, I just think you can make it really nice up there without doing that. And still not have all that upkeep and all that cost and things down the middle of the road. But granted, I think go down Washington Boulevard, they look nice, but they're a real pain in the butt to keep up and clean up in the winter time. And sometimes limbs are leaning over you, smack on your windshields and, you know, there's a lot of upkeep to those things.
Yeah, I would probably, just because of maintenance and things like that, lean towards figuring out a way to put some vegetation trees in the park strips.
You could make it really nice.
And not have a planted median as much as I'd like to see one.
Mhm.
But also I'm thinking as Mountain Road in and of itself is we have a section between Paltry subdivision and the city dump that's not been built. We have a little section at the top of 1050 that's not been built. And then we have a little section west of the Cove to Pleasant View, which half of it has been in a proposed subdivision and been approved
Mhm.
already. So we have these little sections say, oh yeah, let's do that. Then what are you gonna do with all the rest sections that are already built?
Yeah.
It's not, there's no continuity in that.
And say, okay, well, let's go get a $4 million street bond so we can tear the middle of the road up and make it look all the same. When in reality, if we're able to get $4 million of grant money for streets, we need to utilize that to actually put asphalt down and finish Monroe and connect those sections that aren't connected.
Yeah.
So that it can be used.
Like that small section of Monroe going in really doesn't do much of anything. Because of the little ways and it's done.
Yeah.
It doesn't connect anything.
And it would be a big changer.
It would- it'd be a huge
Connecting that
change.
section would really take pressure off of Washington Boulevard and 2600.
1050, all of them.
Yeah, it would change a lot.
Mhm.
So just so we can help Kai out in some kind of direction. So is it a consensus that we're leaning more towards that top option, but maybe look for more landscaping on the park strips on the side?
That's my opinion, just
Yeah.
because of functionality.
And I think make sure that whatever we end up with, the side that on the park strip side, the bike lane side, all that stuff, I think we're in agreement that transportation for bike lanes is important.
Mhm.
And we don't want to get into a situation where those are really narrow. I think keeping those things as wide as possible is going to be helpful for people getting around.
I agree.
I will concede that I'm not in the majority.
I'm just trying to help Kai out.
Yeah, yeah,
'cause
no,
He
no,
keeps
no, no.
coming here and it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, I think you
we're not
guys,
helping us.
I think you guys have,
We're just
like,
trying to.
we're not gonna agree on
focus here,
everything.
yeah.
I can lose.
No,
I
that's
lose all the
okay.
time, really. Yeah, remember the basketball at Peterson's?
Yeah.
Never won. Like, it's fine. But you know, that I have a different, my taste is a little different
Yeah.
and stuff. So, but the majority, we're a body. And so I can go past that.
I recommend we have one large center median with a statue of Brandon Mason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pointing towards Bedloe and Peak
Yeah.
with the big spotlight on it.
Well, there's sports
Absolutely.
And the
Yeah.
sports-
So it's cool.
Pickleball
It's fine. But,
No,
No.
I mean, I respect, if I had my druthers, I'd be with you 100%, but I'm not sure. After we've talked about it, the practicality of it is
Yeah,
there.
the landscape median, because what would end up happening, in my opinion, especially up on the bench up there, it gets baked in the sun, is it's gonna turn into a zero-scape median, which
right.
I would rather
The
just
snake
have.
infested, right? Yeah.
I'd
I don't want
rather
that.
just have a turn lane in there than
A
that.
lot of weeds.
Where if you put trees on the side, then the onus of taking care of that really becomes the lot owner
Mhm.
and the water, the ability to get some water on a tree
Yeah, but now you're putting a quarter in me.
that's on the
Okay,
shoulder.
because who's gonna do a more consistent job of maintaining it? Each individual lot owner or the city in the middle?
Lot owner.
A lot of owner.
Okay, all right, whatever universe you're living in. Okay, exhibit A is my freaking neighbor and I hope you're listening.
What a bad neighbor next to the city owned property.
Yeah,
That is not maintained.
you don't like your neighbor taking care of their property, his neighbor who doesn't take care of their property. That's the city and your public.
The city
Who
doesn't
wins?
have the manpower nor the money to do it appropriately. They just don't have it.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, if your park strip didn't have anything in it except for trees growing, if it was zero scape, but there was trees planted, and tree just needs a little bit of water, really low maintenance. But
Last argument, and then I'm gonna lose.
Of course,
Okay.
up there with all the rocks.
Have you
and
seen,
stuff,
is it
it's
one, is it
water.
what, 200 east, what is it? Okay, you go Lee's, you're going to 2600, you pass Lee's. And then, there's that new community, there's the golf course, but there's that new community, and they put a road there, okay? The left side of that, where the houses are, is beautiful. The right side, where my brother lives, is the back lot of people's homes, and it's a no good wasteland. It looks like it went through nuclear.
they
winter.
landscaped it behind the curb though, didn't they?
What's that?
The people who did the development in there, didn't they landscape
I
from the
challenge you
fence to the
drive down
curb?
it. No,
they
no.
didn't.
Somebody
Just down where the intersection
named
is, they
Justin
did.
Mason has broken up a bunch of concrete and just thrown it. I mean, and he's not alone there. So drive down that.
What's your brother's email while we're on
He's a great
YouTube?
guy, and it's his backyard.
Said code enforcement.
No, I think they're,
That's the back of the ranchettes over there.
yeah, the back of the ranchettes, yeah. And the west side of that road is stunningly beautiful, and there's homes there. And then the right side,
And what side does the city take care of?
I don't think either
Either
of them.
side.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I lose. I told you I lose after this. And Finn.
All right.
Okay.
Kai, I think you got what you need because we've given you what we've got. All right, item 12, remarks from planning commissioners not named Commissioner Mason. I'm
I don't know why I'm the villain
just
here.
kidding. Any remarks? All right. Remarks from planning director. Okay, John,
Nope.
look at that, roll through all these items.
Motion to adjourn.
We have a motion to adjourn
Second.
and a second, all in favor?